In the middle of the silent night, an abandoned factory echoed with screams, heartbreaking that presaged a bad omen. Underneath a horde of zombies, hungry her feast of blood the way. Boyjin laughed, with yielding evidence of the tragic death of his teammates, which caused Yang Shoyan extreme pain and remorse. Yang Shoyan shouted desperately, casting miraculous curses against that woman viper. Tian snuggled up next to Li Shuxian, both of them gloating as they planned how to torture their them to retaliate. Li Shuxian sketched a malicious appearance, thanked for the stolen supplies, and coldly pressed the button to put an end to the loser's fate. The friendship was suddenly broken. Yang Shoyan fell freely into the bridge, becoming officially an delicacy for the herd of heroes. Zombies with eyes as bright as headlights opened their mouths and grunted, plunging to tear apart the fresh that had been offered to them. Fresh blood bled everywhere while Yang Xiaoyang was torn by dozens of mouths, their cries of pain echoing in vain. In its last breath, Yang Xiaoyang swore with bloodshot eyes that he would paying a high price to the adulterous couple, if there was a next life. Yang Xiaoyang woke up startled, soaking wet in sweat, when he heard a familiar voice screaming in his ear, looked in amazement at the long legs of Quang, his mind spinning around in the face of her request to share the deed of ownership. And Xiaoyang cut up from the sofa, unable to believe what his eyes could see, via realizing that he had been reborn just before the day of the apocalypse. Anger erupted as he recalled how in his previous life this gold digger had swindled all of his inheritance and had left it on the street, like a tramp. Then came a series of hellish days when the pandemic broke out, turning the whole world into a bloody playing field for zombies, thirsty for human flesh, that once fought with a gun in hand, building an area with their teammates, and by surviving tenaciously among the horde of monsters. But who knew that the kind bitch I would pretend to be, acting desperately to ask for mercy and shelter, just so that she herself would be the traitor, while putting wide the base doors for the enemies to slaughter all their brothers and sisters. Back to reality. Yang Zhaoyan's day was as cold as a knife. To hear her demand 400,000 yuan dowry without missing a single cent. Kui Jin was still holding his chin up, speaking in a defiant tone, without knowing that in his eyes she was now just a woman, evil one who had to pay for her actions. John Xiaoyuan contained his anger and with coldness gave the woman an ultimatum in front of him. It only gave him a week to disappear from his sight. Without giving it time to haggle, said goodbye to her with a wave of his hand, as if to chase away an evil spirit. An attitude so the decisive factor that left her stunned when the door slammed in her face, left Huijin completely baffled, wondering how the obedient errand boy before dared now to reply with such insolence. Once the problem of his life has been solved, Yang Xiaoyang stood still in the empty room. His back radiated loneliness but also a firm determination. Looked at the clock, digital marking, the 7th of May, 2034, realizing that he had only 1 month left. Beautiful to prepare for the end of the world. While planning, Yang Shoyuan was suddenly startled. His eyes opened in amazement at the sight of a strange glow appear at game-style system interface. Appeared with the mission preparation for the apocalypse, requiring us to own land and store enough food for 1 year. Looking at the interface, I understand, floating in the air. A smile of interest was drawn on Yang's lips. How long, knowing he had a ticket in his hands. Bip, the system's door showed a series of luxury goods such as enhancement potions and supply boxes, but all of them required reward points to be redeemed. Yang Shoyang stood still, looking down, clearly feeling that his destiny was about to change completely thanks to this incredible game trick that had just fallen on him. Yang Shoyang walked through the spacious room, laughing at the stupidity of his former life's self, that had fasted and had deprived himself of everything, even malnutrition, just to raise the adult money for that house. Fortunes with determination. Reached out, and the phone from the table, determined to abandon his life completely and meaningless to enjoy of the last days of peace. Looking at the food app on the screen, Yang Xiaojun said to himself that he had to take advantage of to recharge his batteries to the maximum, because in just 1 month zombies would convert this place into hell on earth. The silent night covered the city's skyscrapers, hiding a false peace. Before the storm of the apocalypse will come and sweep it all away, a sumptuous 3-star banquet Michelin lay before his eyes, with all kinds of delicacies that glow, challenging the Avani gourmet Hyang Xiao Yang. He used the chopsticks to take a piece of meat, stewed face, and examined it. His eyes sparkled with sadness at knowing how to pain. Exquisite was the taste of a dish valued at 300 yuan. Slowly put the meat in his mouth, feeling the taste, rich and unctuous, that melted on his tongue. A luxury that in his previous life, he only dared to look, not touch the explosion. A flavor made young Xiao Zhong moan with pleasure. A sensation euphoric as an electric current, running down his back, making him want to tear his shirt with emotion. No more reservations, pounce on the banquet like a hungry tiger, filling his mouth with all kinds of foods to compensate your stomach, empty for so long, while biting a crab leg. The phone rang unexpectedly, causing Hyang Xiao will also be startled and stop eating, with an expression of amazement on the screen. The phone screen showed Wen's name, Shui, of his ex-best friend, which is likely to meant that it was coming. A moralistic and meaningless talk. The woman's voice on the other side was sour, demanding the house and 1 million zhongmins in cash as compensation. Really, such for which all with delusions of greatness yawn. Chao Yung was not afraid of anyone. He yelled directly at the mad woman on the other side to let out of his sight. His finger pressed the end button hard, call, saying goodbye forever to those parasites in his life. Lay down on the sofa and breathed a sigh, feeling relieved as if he had just disposed of a pile of garbage. Smelly, now was the time for important issues. Needed land with forest and water to build the strongest fortress before the apocalypse came. Said and done, Yan Xiaojun put his hands in his pockets and entered the center of real estate with the attitude of an undercover tycoon. An employee named Soing Dun to him courteously, politely asking him if he wanted to rent or buy a house. Zheng Xiaoyong smiled, about to speak, when a loud voice interrupted the conversation. The manager hiss, with an Oscar expression, appeared, disdaining the customer and ordering Xiaoning to go and load toilet paper instead of serving it. The manager said goodbye to Xiaoning with a wave of his hand to run errands, humiliating the employee in front of the customer without any consideration. Turned to evaluate Yang Xiaoyong with disdain, mocking him for being a poor man, regret that he didn't even have any money to buy a toilet. Yang's eyes Todong Chun with a yellow flame, beginning to pay attention to the mouth stinking of that manager in front of him. The manager Zhu swore with vehemence that would be broadcast live eating excrement if the young man could buy something, while Yang Bonan looked at him like a clown about to. Hin Xiaojun sketched a malicious appearance, accepted the challenge with enthusiasm and promise, find the fool a hot meal, fresh out of the oven, calmly held the powerful black card between two fingers, bowing our lips to affirm that was not there to rent or sell insignificant little houses. Hyang Xiaoyuan showed the card, called buff, stunned, and loudly stated that he was there to buy a large plot of land. Surrounding employees were shocked, murmuring and discussing, realizing the dazzling aura of a real young man. Magnate Xiaoming quickly regained composure, was inclined to offer its services with enthusiasm, and was ready to serve this prestigious customer. Bib to the end, Jiang Xiao literally entered with a firm step, leaving behind the zoo manager, which sweated to cease, embarrassed but still trying to save his last shred of shining dignity. Respectfully delivered the list of properties available to the customer, fit to review it. While she waited to explain the details, Jiang Xiaodan waved his hand to discard the pile of cumbersome papers, stating bluntly that he himself would present its requirements, so as not to waste valuable time. Listed a series of criteria for the preparation of the apocalypse: how to be near mountains, have a water source, and especially have workshops or large buildings. Xiaoning was paralyzed for a few seconds, searching in his memory if there was such a peculiar plot of land, while the manager behind listened curiously. The manager interrupted with a shrewd expression, mentioning the eastern plot of land, but that despised as a dead project with workshops in the middle of the manager laughed with disdain, stating with security that this redneck was doing just to upset, since I had no money to buy on. Daoyane ignored the mockery of that idiot pressure Joning on the ground and he stuttered by admitting that the boy had fled. He examined the map with sharp eyes, realizing that these factories were the perfect strength to install aluminum barbed wire at a ridiculous cost. Without hesitation for a second, Xiao Xiaojun closed the deal all at once and demanded to sign the payment contract immediately. What made Shunning instinctively himself. Frightened, the employee opened her eyes wide. With a stunned face, I just believed that this customer would have decided to purchase an abandoned land so quickly and easily. Xiang Dawden closed the till once at earnest. To Dick complete the procedure quickly. Because someone was waiting to enjoy of a plate of fresh and hot excrement immediately. El manager Shu looked at the receipt for the 300,000 deposit. Jones with his eyes and mouth open shouted desperately. Because I could not believe that this brat will spend a fortune on a pile of junk scrap metal. Tell him the boy in little shoulder here a minute. Provocative by stating that he had already paid, and that now it was the turn of the manager to fulfill his promise to eat waste in front of everyone while Dong Xiaoyum turned around and left like a guy. Employees joined together to transmit live the mirror scene, Shu kicking and refusing to fulfill the humiliating gamble. The Ting Ting Apocalypse system announced the completion of the land acquisition mission, but Yang Xiaoyuan had headaches because he had spent all the money of the adoption and needed to earn more to store food. A man in a white coat, husky smile suddenly hit Yang's family figure in the crowd and silently asked what he was doing there. The man in the white coat got stuck in place. Sweating my eyes out while following Yang's back, found him with an expression full of doubt and concern. In the office, the Chu manager was immobilized, mouth down on the floor by their colleagues, and they put something hot in his mouth, making him desperately compete for his life. But it was in vain. The scene changes to a luxurious apartment, where the house fortune squidgy was sitting cross-legged, smoking altogether, when his phone rang, suddenly breaking the mood. Kujin replied in Ash's voice, recognizing Li Shusen, but was stunned immediately upon hearing that he was gossiping that they were doing so. I had just gone to the real estate agency to buy land. Kujin hit the toilet table hard, bitterly deducing that the 300,000 yuan then Yun Taoyum used to buy the land with the money from his dowry. She screamed on the phone like a wild beast, ordering them to search for Yang Xiaoyong to reclaim the money she assumed belonged to him. Beatrice Tanto, Jin Xiaojun was sitting thoughtfully in his apartment with a headache, calculating where I would get a mountain of money to build a base, a fortified shelter. Violent knocks on the door interrupted his strategic line of thought, making him jump as soon as he opened the door. Yang Xiaoyong was intercepted by Quang and her friend. The fortune house pounced on him to question how he dared to spend his money. He made a face of faint, provocatively asking what the hell those women were babbling in front of their house. Fine pointed him straight to the face and yelled at him, absurdly arguing that the adoptive's money was his. So the land he had just bought, of course, Yang also belonged to him. Seo Jun looked at her with, as if it were a strange creature, speechless before the degree, that woman's delirium and brazenness. He took out a bundle of bills and hit her, stating that he had a lot of money, but I forbade him to touch a single penny, because he already knew everything about his adventure with Li Shixian. Kujin was completely paralyzed, sweating cold in abundance, realizing that his sighing had to sordid secret for a long time. Instead of listening to her friend, chattering about Yan Zhouyan misunderstanding, threw a jar of cold water on both of them when he revealed that Huang had an affair with old Li Shixian. Kicked that princess out of his house. Listening to Quang in extreme panic, wondering why their secret meetings in hotels had been discovered. Barely entered the elevator, her friend turned to reproach Qian for her stupidity, forcing her to admit her murky relationship with Li Shixian. Qian was pulling his hair out for having lost his mind. The two women in gold had to withdraw temporarily in an alley, no way out to plan again from scratch. The dry sound of the elevator doorbell resounded. That a new act of treason was about to be revealed. The friend revealed her real bitch face, her eyes shone with the ambition to displace their good sister, to be left alone with Jian Shaoyan in the abandoned factory area. Jin Xiaoyan was leading the construction team to transform the site in a fortress impregnable with steel walls and watchtowers. The foreman reads, "That I was curious," was corrupted by Jin Xiaoyan, who demanded that the war would be completed in just 1 month. When he saw that the foreman was trying to complain about the difficulties, Yang Xiaojun threatened to hire another team. What made the man sweated profusely and gave way quickly. It turned out that the problem was only the money. The foreman changed his attitude faster than an omelette. Laughing and signaling, they asked for a price increase in exchange for work to death to meet the deadline. The foreman, upon hearing the tempting offer of 20 million, his eyes shone like headlights, but still demanded of 5 million yuans before starting the work. Yang Shujin closed the deal all at once, promised to transfer the money the following week, and ordered him to get to work immediately, leaving him paralyzed, so that the foreman, Yan, will work quietly. Boshihijono let him in, but and stated bluntly that if he did not pay, the land would belong to you. While discussing important issues, a mellow voice resounded. His friend suddenly appeared, with a fake smile. Without giving Jin Xiaoyang time to react, she pounced and hugged him tightly on the arm, floating their breasts against him as if they were very intimate. The shameless one hit him like a leech, sweetly calling him brother, over and over again to find out why he was in this place. Remote memories of hate returned. Young Xiaoyan gritted his teeth as he recalled that in his previous life, this manipulative woman together with Kui Jin had stripped him of all his possessions. Ignoring her cold attitude, she continued, praising the beautiful scenery, and fantasizing that he had bought the land there to build a vacation villa. I just put up with this nauseating young falsehood more. Zhao Yan shook his hand away abruptly and banned him with rough voice to meddle in their affairs. She was in extreme panic, cursing in silence because the loser, who used to turn red just by touching it, was now as cold as an iceberg. Hian Taonong turned around coldly and ordered the workers to expand the entrance to the work, ignoring the manipulative woman. That I was standing there as if it were air. Instead of leaving offended this woman, Bree had the idea of displacing Huang to monopolize the gold mine that was Yan. Back in his luxurious apartment, Yan Xiaoyan had a headache, calculating. Since the 3 million Jones hanging from the house were like a drop in the ocean, compared to the cost of building the fortress, suddenly realized that with the apocalypse about to arrive, this house would turn into a pile of rubble. Sell it quickly to many people to get cash was the real solution. Hein Xiaoyang's gaze was cold and determined. He was ready for a lucrative operation to trick the unwary into maximizing their profits. While playing, violent knocks on the door resonated as if they were going to collect a debt. He snapped his tongue in annoyance, knowing that the old neighbor had come to cause problems again. He went to open the door early, fed up with the old man downstairs using all kinds of tricks to harass him and force him to sell him the apartment. As soon as the door was opened on Tuesday, Li opened his eyes wide and screamed, falsely accusing Yan him all night long, and caused noise to have an excuse to belittle it. Dan shouted, endeavored to refute the old manhwa, claiming that he had gone to bed early. But the old man kept screaming to impose himself. Without bothering to argue and waste saliva, he raised his hand to shut the old man up and announced that he would sell the house immediately, leaving him completely in shock. Grandpa Li opened his mouth with a stunned face, not being able to believe what I heard when I heard that the brat really accepted sell the house. Yang Xiaoyang remained in a position of superiority, with arrogance, crossing his arms and declaring that he would sell, but only if certain conditions were met. To close the deal, he shouted a price of 5 billion Jones to transfer immediately so that he could pay his debts, but the trap was that he would only deliver the key 6 months later. When he saw that the old man was hesitating and calculating, Yang Xiaoyan made the attempt to leave and close the door. What made the old having to miss the good opportunity? The boy was frantically arrested by the fell completely into the trap because of his greed, quickly meeting all demands at all times. And when there was a contract in writing so that the brat would not back down, Shen Xiaoyang smiled with disdain, thinking to himself that the old man could cling to that concrete coffin and wait for death. When the great catastrophe came, once he said goodbye to the dead man, pulled out his phone and mentally calculated The 5 million, the old man plus the 3 million of a loan. Fast, 8 million johanes in cash in their hands. The Ting Ting system immediately reported the completion of the land acquisition mission. He quickly pressed to claim the reward and unlock the following support function, with fresh money in hand. Had to spend it immediately. Went directly to the shopping center, largest in the city, to begin its large-scale resource hoarding. Hyun Taoyun pushed the shopping cart, running like an athlete sweeping away food shelves at the speed of light to fill its warehouse with provisions for 365 days. Passers-by looked at Yan Xiaoyong as if he were a strange creature whispering to himself, each other, to stay away from that madman who was hogging goods. Yan Xiaoyong ignored the looks of others, driving by himself a long line of carts full of supplies in the middle of the supermarket. Like a god, the fools began to laugh and make fun of him, calling him a paranoid who believed in the rumors at the end of the world, not knowing that death was about to knock on his door. The system rang out the completion of the mission and awarding 10 points at an instant. Just the price of the coveted protagonist supply chest in the store. With full adrenaline, Yan Xiaoyan decided to bet everything on luck, resolutely redeeming all your points to open that box too. The smile was painful. Their points were reduced to 0, but in return obtained a box that radiated a dazzling brilliance, promising an object of divine level, with a powerful burst. Received the level 1 space ring with an amazing capacity of 500 units, and that dominant of freezing time inside Hyen. Dudum stroked the deploying with heads, and smiled with satisfaction. Because as he had predicted, the first reward of the system, it was always a top quality item. He was delighted by realizing that the time freeze function meant that the fresh food thrown in there would never spoil. The system included a new contract that required storage food for 10 years. But before I could assimilating it, a loud cry interrupted his thoughts. An elegantly dressed man in a suit led the security guards, who are pounced and responded with arrogance, who dared to cause problems in his territory. Meeting Young Tao stopped with a mixture of surprise and annoyance by recognizing his old Shoyun was not surprised either. His cold eyes immediately recognized Yang Tao, his former classmate. Memories surfaced. Yang Tao was the bully who took advantage of the weak in school, the same one Yang Xiaoyang had directly scolded when he attempted to extort protective money from her. I love his Yang attitude. Tao pointed menacingly and demanded Yang Xiaoyan to return all the merchandise if he did not want to. Yang problems. Tao opened his lips in a mocking smile. Samofo of the custom of him, and declared in a clear voice that he was a customer who came to buy. Yang Tao shouted angrily, defying Yang Tao Hyun to pay on the spot, as he was sure that someone like him could not have money. 1 hour later, Jindu personnel sweated while scanned barcodes. Invoices extended endlessly, while Hyun Xiaoyun continued to pick up the products calmly. The cashier was trembling as she held a very long bill, a total of more than 56,000 yuans under the eyes of Yang Tao. Yang Tao hit the card reader in front of Yang Xiaoyan and shouted aggressively, demanding payment. Waiting for the show of seeing the rejected card, Yang Xiaoyan, without saying a word, pulled out his black card at the speed of light. His eyes shone with a sharp and defiant gaze. The beep for payment successful resounded like a slap in Yang's face, Tao making him sweat profusely. Unable to believe what his eyes could see, security guards and Yang Tao were about to leave when Yang Xiaoyang called them. Suddenly, with a tone full of authority that stopped them all, Yang Tao turned sharply, with a reddened face in anger, and shouted, asking what trick wanted to play his opponent in the midst of so many people. Hen Tao would once smiled with malice, demanding an appropriate or would immediately return all that enormous amount of merchandise. Feeling humiliated, Yang Tao opened his eyes and screamed, accusing Yang Xiaoyan of deliberately trying to cause problems in your business. The crowd around began to broadcast live, exposing the situation, and pressured Yang Tao to himself, if it did not want to go viral negatively on Hyang social networks. Additional by stating that if the governor was sincere enough I would buy 10 times the current quantity of merchandise. In the face of the trembling Grant, Yang Xiaoyong lifted his powerful black card, challenging him to bring the post-terminal. To verify the enormous balance without hesitation, Yang Xiaoyong the card said hifly. And the beep echoed, confirming someone's status. With so much money that he could crush anyone, Yang Xiao looked at the figure of 700,000 yuan that appeared on the machine, his eyes about to come out of the curtains, and a cold sweat soaked his body because of his old friend's extravagance. Yang Xiaoyong sketched a challenging trajectory, forcing his opponent to break down, while the manager his teeth in anger. But he was completely powerless. I just used the power of Yang money. Tao tilted 90 degrees and swelled deeply. His ego now crushed on the Hyun floor. His old friend and brutally humiliated him, warning him that next time he would behave and let himself. And I said to the, smelling the sweet scent of money, and Tao's attitude took a 180-degree turn, and ran after Yan, Taodum worshipping him as a loyal dog. The astute manager quickly offered a suggestion, saying that the supermarket lunch was not enough, and suggested looking for a supplier, largest wholesaler to accumulate young merchandise. Taodum launched to cut the living live, suggesting that you submit a contact. And the name sanction was immediately pronounced by Yan. Tao proudly Young Tao. Li called his accomplices to give them the news. To get a good booty while young. Devote him was following inside. As crosses its corruption network. Both headed quickly to the vast warehouse area, where huge trucks were waiting to carry out the collection operation of the century. Suddenly a car jumped at a design speed, tearing apart the silence with the roar of his engine, which caused both of them to pay attention. The luxury car skidded, burning delicate, and I found a trace of bird odor, what caused Yang Tao to fall backwards in terror. While Yang stood to like at him. Shaw twinted at the sight of the driver in front of him, and cursed in silence for this attitude so presumptuous and shameless. Car door opened. San Chen got off with the attitude of a boss, smoking a cigarette and with a chin raised to the sky. Yang Tao quickly ran to act as an intermediary, successfully introducing Yang Xiao, in the hope that his old friend, to remember their relationship of yesteryear. Zhang Shen's frowned, pretending not to know him, forcing Yang Tao to emphasize Yang's identity. Zhou Yang as his high school classmate, to refresh your memory. After a while rummaging through his short-term memory, the chief smuggler gave a long and exclaimed, recognizing his old man. Known he. Deliberately cigarette smoke in Yang's face, Taoyum to intimidate him, but the protagonist kept his expression cold and immutable. Shang laughed out loud with and let out comments, sarcastic about Chang's-ness. Dodoing the bet. He pulled the lace of the sweatshirt with Kang Xiaojian with disdain, criticizing their cheap and fake clothes, and humiliating the protagonist for being a poor man, devil who was still trying to appear. Feeling insulted at having to deal with a poor Yan, Sheng Yang Tao by the neck and pushed him away, screaming angrily for having wasted his time. Senchen kicked Yang Tao for wasting his time, while releasing his cheap theory on how to judge people in order to belittle Yan. Chao Yan bent his lips in a mocking smile, realizing that his aura direction was completely absent before an ignorant and rude. Upon hearing the sensitive words saying Shamsi, pounced in firmly the collar of the Hyam shirt, Xiaoyong grunting and demanding an explanation. Instead of being scared, Yang found him and added a provocation that made the gangster explode in anger. The protagonist made an expression of total, pretending not to understand why he would think of himself for telling the truth. Yang Tao in the middle sweated deeply and hastened to clarify that the boss, Sang, was really very allergic to the word ignorant. His choice of blood shone fury, threw a strong kick to the side of the nearby car, creating a loud noise to intimidate his opponent. He, teeth grinding, and threatened that if he did not buy the entire truckload of goods today, no one would get out of there unharmed. Hu Shishoyonde ignored the threats, boldly pulled out his phone and asked for his account number to talk to money. By viewing the transfer message of 1 billion yuan as deposit for an order of 5 million yuan, Sancheng's eyes shone brightly. Shocked by the extravagance of Vipyong customer, Xiaoyong, without saying more, ordered everything to be collected from rice, oil and salt to appetizers. Everything edible he would take. Shen Shen smiled with malice inside, thinking, lie that he had found a duck process to dispose of the goods, about to expire that it had in long-standing stock. He led the customer to the huge, affordable, and offered a 10% discount to try his opponent to take the entire batch of assorted merchandise. Zhang Xiaodun was not an easy novice at Qidian, stood firm, and declared that he would only close the order after verifying personally the quality. With the food package in hand, the protagonist examined it silently, causing the atmosphere in the universe to become tense as a violin string. With just a glance, Jiang Choyum unmasked the deception ploy. Noting that apart from the external reflection, all content was expired because Yang was killed. Shang sweated profusely, and quickly tried to save the situation, lowering the price 50% discount to rescue his Yang scam. Zhao Yang coldly returned, stating that its 5 million yuan in cash would only be used to purchase the highest quality items. However, Yan Xiaojun suddenly changed his mind, stating that it still had plans to use this pile of industrial waste. I found Sangshen Kitchered 8, and not understanding anything Hian, doubt imposed that deal to Yahello merchant expired at a very low price, but set a trap to pay in a month. A great move, because by then the apocalypse would have arrived, and the money would be just worthless paper. Shang was being arrested for not receiving payment for the expired goods, but Yim Shadon immediately reassured him with a home ownership agreement, and stated bluntly that he was the most reliable buyer. Tian Shadon sketched a slight smile, claiming that this pile of hearts would soon become pure gold. Paul the chief smuggler. Jiang Xing's paralyzed and sweating profusely, without understanding what this madman was up to, without letting the other party ask. Yan Xiaoyang coldly closed the delivery order, and pulled out his phone to answer just as it sounded when Yan answered. Zhao Yang immediately recognized the voice of his grand pally prey, who wanted to buy his old house, to execute the next step in your plan of Hyang capital accumulation, and ordered to Sings to take care of the food stack. Then turned around, and walked away. I love the two gangsters, Sentamies and henchmen, looking at him in a daze, saying, Shench and henchmen. Henchmen were stuck in place, completely confused, wondering if they had just made a big deal, or if a brat was manipulating them in the house. For sale, Grand Pally hastily stacked 400,000 juans as deposit, and immediately nodded to the condition of Han to move in 3 months, to see that the old Grand Pally signed the contract so quickly, like lightning, without even bothering to see the Han house. Zhao squinted his eyes with suspicion, and questioned him directly about this unusually hurried grandpa motive. He immediately made a pitiful face, making up a story about his granddaughter Shun Shun, that he needed a household registration to go to school, begging Yan Choyong not to cancel the deal at the last minute. Jian Choyong smiled with disdain, exposing the old man's false sincerity, great pally, and threatening to go up the price of the house. To see the reaction of this old big fox, Pally opened his mouth and complained that this amount of money was all his fortune, acting on a humiliation plan to ensure that Zheng Xiaoyang will not change his mind. Yan Huaoden's mildly reassured him, and then watched coldly as the old great Pally signed the contract for the sale of his lie, with determination, with white paper and black ink in hand. Grand Pally moaned with pleasure, his greedy face stretched to the max, thinking he had gotten it from the neighboring brat. Having achieved its goal, the old Grand Pally submissively was a Hian Daoyuan standing there, with a deep gaze, and firing the customer. Followed the old man's back with his gaze, thinking to himself that with that personality falsely benevolent, all his family, Grand Palace family, would then disappear in the first month of the apocalypse. Suddenly an idea came to John's mind. Xiaoyan, who called him again and asked the old man, Great Pally, its current address, leaving him stunned and not understanding anything. Once the matter of the sale of the house has been resolved, and Xiaoyan immediately went to the construction site to verify progress, where workers were eagerly building their fortress under the supervision of Foreman Li. The foreman formally walked and deftly mentioned the second payment, but Yang Xiaoman had an authoritarian boss attitude, promising to make the transfer immediately. The foreman formally pointed to the sky with pride, bragging about the strength of the construction, and confirming that the most important discovery was ready to be used. Playing with the vertiginous progression, Yang smiled with disdain, and picked up the phone to immediately call Chang, ordering him to transport the pile of hot merchandise to the meeting point. Workers, while loading and unloading, praised the boss for being an engineer paying salaries. To convert that, this Tuesday in a fortress, although inside secretly laughed at the fantasy of the rich. Yang Xiaoyan personally managed the site, shouting to the workers who carefully separated fresh food. Without allowing a single mistake, the gigantic door of paradise slowly closed, and the workers left en masse. After completing the enormous amount of work, standing alone in the middle of a mountain of goods, stacked to the yang roof, and shouted out loud, feeling refreshed from having finished the job. The familiar tin sound resonated. The apocalypse system announced good news. The mission to store 10 years of supplies had been completed by granting reward points and unlocking new items. Without hesitation for a second, Yang Xiaoyan used his accumulated points to scan the gift box of awakening ability, feeling extremely fortunate to possess power even before the Grady came. The screen showed the mental eye-mind skill. Level 1 is a failure, dominant that allows the user to see through the curtain of the opponent instantly. Yang Xiaoyan smiled with disdain and calculatingly, knowing very well that in the next era of cannibalism, this ability to distinguish between friends and enemies would be more valuable than pure gold. The system continued scratching right where it was itching, launching a new mission that required equipment to the teeth, which was perfectly in line with his next plan. Bloody at nightfall, Yang Xiaoyan entered the bustling black market alone, a place where they met all kinds of undesirable elements and prohibited objects. Yang Xiaoyan entered the chaotic black market, where black market crowds competed to restrict the prices of some of the false antiques they had just dug up from Qin Shi Zhuan's grave. The day before, Xiaoyan smiled with disdain, listening to the dribbling of a novice locution that he was trying to lower the price of an item to 300 yuan, turned out to be an old lichiction. I was delighted to close the deal for a jade bracelet, false at a ridiculously low price, thinking he had gotten it from the young seller. Xiaoyan laughed for her breasts because he read Xu had bought the fake item to cheat the house. Fortune squibbling. Truly a perfect match in the world of angels. Ignoring the riffraff's trickery, his gaze towards Xia Zhang stopped in front of a stand displaying a wide variety of fin swords and sharp, accompanied by the metallic jingle of their shot. The target was in sight. Yang. The weapons post, white people I needed in the midst of this chaotic market. Yang Xiaoyan crouched down, and a dagger. His cold gaze was fixed directly at the camouflage seller, and killed by heavy goods. Using a secret password, the camouflage salesman, waved his hand indifferently, pretending to ignorance and saying that only were sold here. No sharpening edge or truncheons, not hot goods than the customer needed. Undeterred by his attitude, claiming that what he needed was much harder than that, referring to real heavy weapons. Camouflage salesman seller immediately changed his expression. His eyes shone with suspicion and bloodlust, thinking that the brat in front of him was deliberately there to cause problems. Camouflage salesman seller opened his eyes wide when his phone changed, and his account showed 200,000 Jonans won, very credible sum that left him paralyzed for a few seconds. Yang Xiaoyan showed the transfer screen, smiled with disdain, and told the salesman seller who would not be surprised so soon, because he did serious business and did not have time to cheat, by smelling the sweet scent of money. Camouflage salesman seller hastily called his henchman Shan to guard the post, while he himself was in charge of this fit client. The camouflage salesman lured Han Xiaoyan into a hidden corner, shattering that in a place would be more convenient to display hot merchandise to the tycoon. Both stopped in front of a ruined brick house, hidden deep in an alley, where the kimo seller was kept. Some dangerous toys that he did not dare to exhibit publicly inside the warehouse. The salesman kimo seller took out a homemade shotgun that fired pellets and shot at a price of 2,000 Johannans, but they have automatically is by tourist capital upon being directly by the customer for their poor quality merchandise. Camouflage salesman camel seller kept silent. His gaze began to show and scrutiny for having met with a player so experienced. The camo seller had to bring out a slightly better merchandise and revolver that fired 9mm bullets, asking for an exaggerated price of 5,000 yuans. In addition to an exorbitant cost for ammunition, Tian Xiaoyong will stand up, imposing as a god of war, grunting that this pile of scrap metal was not worth a deposit of 200,000 at all. Joans who had just transferred. Camouflage salesman camo seller sweated profusely. His voice trembled as he faked ignorance and asked, "What tank? I need a ruse to keep the huge sum of money before the god of slaughter." Dinan Hud Shomitoyama launched the coup decisive in declaring a 10% deposit in advance for an arms order, valued at 2 million yuan, leaving his opponent paralyzed. Camouflage salesman camo seller sweated profusely, exactly asking about the identity of the tycoon. But Han Xiaoyong coldly interrupted him, demanding the disappearance of its supplier capacity. Stunned by the customers, tipped the camo seller. Seller hurried to ask permission to leave for a moment, and prepare yourself mentally for the next move. The old wooden door opened with a crackle, indicating that the trader, camo seller, had returned after calming down. The camo seller poked his head out to check the surroundings with caution, making sure there was no third party listening to this business. Billionaire camo seller returned with a serious expression and a penetrating look, stating with certainty that the Aeon Zhaoyang had found the right direction to burn money. The camo seller approached Heng's ear. Zhao Yonhan whispered to plan to him of the secret darkness by midnight the day after tomorrow without forgetting. Remind him to bring cash to close the deal. The attitude of the salesman camo is changed 180 degrees, submissively bid farewell to the god of fortune Yang Shujin, and repeatedly reminded him to be careful when walking, as if he were a member of his own family. As it moved away from the Hyun black market, Zhao Yong suddenly stopped with an expression of surprise. Upon hearing his name echoing from behind, the man in the white Kaufman, appeared with a malicious appearance, mocking that Hein Xiaoyuan had money to spend extravagantly and ignore the Kuijin, thanks to the sale of family relics. The man in the white coat, Kaufman, approached with arrogance, dropping words of and asking if Hyun Xiaoyuan had sold all his properties to return to his hometown, natal to raise fish and grow vegetables. Hyun Xiaoyuan did not bother to discuss, sketched a friendship full of confidence, because I had just found the punching bag, perfect to test your new ability. The mental eye. Might say a bright blue eye appeared on Hyun permit, but didn't see through the HUD, dark and the opponent's red arrow. Hyun Xiaoyang stated bluntly that the other man, man, used fake articles to cheat in love. And by the way, made fun of that Kuijin. It was just a cheap second-hand merchandise. A perfect match. When provoked by the man in his robe, White became livid with anger, squeezing his bag of things and screaming helplessly at the sight that the customer, Vip, was molested. The camouflage salesman appeared immediately from behind, clarified his curiosity, and asked if the boss knew this idiot. The camouflage salesman enthusiastically asked for permission to lecture the insolent and Yang Doyonklesley agreed, but warned him not to kill him because he had other plans. Upon receipt of the order, the henchmen immediately surrounded the man in the robe. White, who in extreme panic tried to intimidate the gangsters with words in front of the cold snow stick in camouflage salesman's hand. The man in the robe, White, was very frightened, raised his hands in surrender, and asked to speak with good sense before he finished speaking. Was shot down with a pump testing. Officially the punches of black market people. The man in the white coat was was already doing, crushed on the floor with his face swollen and marked by, still shouting Hyun's name, Joyeonwi, and swearing that he would pay off this debt. 2 days after the silent night covered the huge warehouse complex where heavy trucks met in secret to load weapons. Bushajin stood upright in front of the open container, inspecting hospitals, the enormous quantity of merchandise that had just arrived, as planned by the system. A crisp jingle sounded confirming that the mission, complete armament, had been completed. Opening a military arsenal, stacked together with the reward of an enhancement potion. Physics, he observed with delight. The virtualized object that had just appeared on his hand, bowing our lips in a smile of satisfaction. When he saw that the system had granted him, generously, another high-quality enhancement potion, was not a common product. This was an improvement potion, +2 with twice as much baggage as the items, properties that were sold in the system store. Without hesitation for a second, Yang Xiaoyan extended his arm and stuck the syringe in, directly on his neck to assimilate this power, dominant in your body. The strength of medicine overflowed, making him grit his teeth to support his eyes. Glowed with energy as their muscles began to transform violently under his skin. The pain passed. It represents an extreme feeling of fullness. Clenched his fists, feeling the new torrent of power flowing through his veins. With dots in hand, should spend them immediately. Open the system store interface to examine whether I should purchase an enhancement potion or a kit for your next move. En Xiaoyang squeezed the empty syringe in his hand, his gaze cold and sharp, filled with the determination to explode the maximum advantage of power that he had just obtained. His whole body exploded with a golden aura. He was euphoric when he saw that his physical statistics reached 8 points, and immediately scanned in search of a target to test this power. Dominant, his eyes shone with interest by setting its target on the pile of materials, messy in the corner of paradise. A curtain of sufficiency was drawn on her lips. Having found his experimental Hyun boxing bag, Kyudun coldly squeezed a thick twisted steel bar. Their highly focused eyes, pouring all his strength on his arm, which was bubbling with energy, let out a loud scream, then swinged his arm, hitting hard the steel bar against the wall, creating a powerful gust of wind, howling that made space seem to shake. The impact was so strong that the steel bar, hard as a rock, bent and curved abruptly, sparking, blinding when hitting the hard surface. At the sight of the steel bar bent like a noodle, laughed with strength and arrogance, stating with confidence that with this power of attorney, early stage zombies were only pets. I thought it wasn't worth considering. After testing his strength, he looked again, the pile of military weapons in the truck, and decided to keep them all in his space ring, for absolute safety and easy transport. With only one movement of his hand, the space ring, all supplies and weapons were absorbed instantly into a vacuum at a design-foot speed. Lonely in the empty mirror, Xiaoyan thoughtfully reviewed his plan, for the last time realizing that on the day Ofeng was only 2 days away, when he invented a story about his granddaughter who needed changing schools to force him to buy a house. A reason that clearly smelled of deception. Ran his hand over his face with a bitter smile on his face, telling himself that, although I was already used to the betrayal of mankind in the apocalypse, I still couldn't stand to see him starve to death without helping him. But Yum Jeojin came out of the mirror door, deciding to give the old man some weapons to survive, considering it a fair payment for the money debts. Luxurious car, gently towards the old and deteriorating apartment complex, seeming completely out of place between the buildings, covered with moss and ruinous surroundings. Hitting out of the Yum car, criticizing this remote area, murmuring that without a geese, only a saint could find this pigsty. Slowly climbed the dark stairs, secretly despising the poverty of Mr. Lee, having to hide in that apartment. Sheep on the top floor. Hyun Shamyong raised his hand and knocked on the door. The sound of the bangs resonated with determination, breaking the gloomy atmosphere of the corridor. Suddenly stopped, sweating deep as I remember that I had to take things out of the first ring, because if the old man saw him conjuring things out of nowhere, it would be a problem to explain it quickly. Activated its space ring, releasing a pile of stacked boxes in front of the door, setting up the scene as if the would have loaded with effort out there. The sound of singing sandals along with Mr. Lee's hurried voice echoed from behind the door, indicating that the homeowner was about to show up to receive his gift. Mr. Lee opened the door with a shrunken, sweaty expression, rushing to ask for a rent for next week. Without even getting a good look at the visitor's face, the old man stopped by opening his eyes wide open. Upon realizing that the visitor at the front door was young, Xiaoyun, and a gang of useless homeboys, imposing in the dessert corridor next to a mountain of cardboard boxes, leaving Mr. Lee speechless with amazement, asking him the reason for his appearance in that place so remote without letting the old man ask. Yang Xiaojun gave an urgent order, asking him to help bring things home immediately before the neighbors became aware of it. While Mr. was limping breathlessly after the hard work and praised the strength of young Yang, Xiaoyun remained undisturbed in the middle of the room, to be already full of provisions. He examined the structure of the ramshackle apartment, nodding with satisfaction, commenting that the main door was sufficiently robust to withstand the initial phase. Yang Xiaoyun changed his attitude, demanding with a serious voice to Mr. Lee to listen carefully to his next words. As an order of life or death, he stated that these provisions would last 6 months, and that, warned that the world would change completely starting tomorrow. Ignoring the expression, stunned by the old man, the Lord readily why store things if they would soon move, but Sean. When his gaze found a photo frame on the table, was paralyzed. His pupils contracted when they saw that the girl in the photo with great pally was Shan, a familiar character in his memories. Bu Chujin stared at the photo and came out directly. The name of his granddaughter Shunzhen. What made you sweat like crazy? As it had never disclosed this information, he continued to ask the girl's current location. While greatly, I thought his granddaughter was at school and was in charge of the transfer procedures as an antiquado. Memories of his previous life flooded his mind. Fine Zhaoyuan recalled the scene of Shanzhen, crying desperately in the ruined city, for having frequently caused the death of his grandmother. His gaze turned cold as he recalled the old stage, where this old man had risked entering at the school full of zombies to save his granddaughter, and had died tragically. Yang Xiaoyong slammed the frame of the photo against the table, promising himself that would compensate for this regret and rewrite the ending. For both the grandfather and the granddaughter, he returned to reality, and coldly declared that great pally, I would no longer need to move into that house. What scared the old man, who thought the deal had been cancelled at the last minute, Xiang Shaoja dismissed this senseless concern, claiming that tomorrow the world would turn into hell, and ordering a large pally to accompany him to school to pick up Chanshan immediately. At the sight of Grand Pally Kim's stunned expression, Tong unrealized to explain it in words to the previous generation at that time was completely absent. Yang Xiaojun decided to talk some sense into him, the opponent with actions. While I was asking the boy reads on the concept of famine and turned gently the space ring in his yang hand. Xiaoyan activated his ability by making space to twist and absorb all the merchandise in the ring in an instant, which made the governor, Leah, terrified, thinking it was magic. Young Xiaoyan activated his ability, causing his entire body to radiate a bright blue aura, and coldly declared that he controlled the future, forcing Grand Palias to submit completely. If he wanted to save the life of his granddaughter Shunshan, he brought his face closer to the boys with eyes burning with murderous intent, and also with a hoarse voice, the Shanzhen school leadership immediately. The car was fired like lightning. Large Pally sitting in the co-pilot's seat. His face was pale as death, and he was sweating like crazy as he showed the way to that madman. The chirping of the brakes was deafening. The car made a spectacular skid and stopped abruptly right in front of the school entrance. Under the light of the sunset, Yang Xiaojun exited the car like a wind, insistently asking about the number of the bedroom room. What made Great Pally stuttered before he could respond. Inside the school's backyard, a group of student criminals was cornering and harassing a vulnerable girl. As in a poor quality school drama script, the delinquent with a tail of horse gave a tremendous slap to Sanchin, shouting insults out of jealousy of a certain Sankhya King Shanshan, hugging a swollen cheek with tears in her eyes. tried to clarify that he did not want to have nothing to do with this guy. But his words were weightless without giving him time to breathe. The one in the white shirt pounced by throwing a direct kick into the stomach that made Shanzhen flew off and fell to the ground in great pain. The two cruel stalkers her hair, and Shan's head was thrown back, continuing with mental torture and making fun of the girl for daring to reject the feelings of another. The cruel matona the hair of Shan and pulled him backwards, questioning her endlessly, making the girl only able to make one grimace of extreme pain to see the boy arrive. The Metmes were not only not afraid, but mocked in recognizing the alleged murderer. Shan, who was running in a hurry next to Dang Xiaoyong, Grand Pally, went forward, pointing out directly the brats and yelling to release the girl, while Yang Xiaoyan's killer aura behind it suddenly began to emanate with force. 3 thugs dressed in blue sportswear jumped to block the road, wielding and baseball bats, and threatened the old man to get him to go play elsewhere. Without further ado, the young thugs pounced on the Grand Pallet, one him by the shirt, another wielded the bat, with the intention of giving a manners lesson to the elderly man. The leader of the thugs wielded the baseball bat and struck a fatal blow to the head with an aggressive attitude, wanting to send it to the other neighborhood palm. The iron bat that flew at full speed stopped suddenly in the air, by being easily caught by one hand, hard as cold steel. Hyan Auden with the bat in his hand. His knife-sharp eyes looked directly at the bully and taught a lesson, full of for their bad habits and defects. Even though his attack was blocked, the rebel still did not show fear, smiled with disdain, and launched provocations, thinking they had found another easy prey. Without bothering to discuss, Yang Xiaoyang threw a kick, lightning into the chest of the knife holder, blowing it up against the wall and spitting blood on the spot. The bully who had just been kicked, yellow lightning fired away, falling backwards pathetically, to see his teammate defeated in an instant. The remaining 2 sweated cold, but they still tried to calm down each other and launched a group attack. Ham's eyes shone with a cold blue glow, activated its maximum concentration to see through every movement of the rabble. The 2 young thugs separated to surround him on 2 flanks, one with a bat and one with a knife. For his, the bully screamed to gain momentum and then wielded the baseball bat with all his might towards his opponent's head, with the intention of ending the fight. Thanks to its improved physical statistics, Yang Xiaoyan dodged the blow with ease. Its reaction speed was now more than that of a normal person. Just as his opponent lost his balance, extended his hand and firmly the back of the neck of the one holding the bat, like in catching a chick. Using overwhelming force on his arm, stamped the face of the thug against the hard-tiled floor with a brutal blow. The bully rolled his eyes with open mouth, screaming desperately at the feeling of pain, unbearable by the terrible impact. The razor bully took the opportunity to attack from behind, but Yang Xiaoyan only needed to bow his head, aimed for the sharp blade to cut through the air. The bully with all his strength wielded the bat, but Yang Xiaoyan, keeping a cold head, undeterred by the insignificant attack. As fast as lightning, a lightning kick was thrown, stopping the opponent's mysterious attack in the air. The kick hit the chest squarely, making the brat fly backwards. Tasting the pain for daring to mess with a beast, fell backwards to the ground with a sharp blow, with a face distorted by pain, officially joining the group of those who, already doing on the ground with their Heian companions, standing among the defeated thugs who have already made scatter, and radiating an aura of absolute that did not allow anyone to make a sound. Once he got rid of the men, headed firmly toward the woman in black, who was and asked him what the hell he wanted to do. Without saying a word, slapped him so hard that he deflected his face, giving him a lesson on equality. Slapping was so strong that it left a red mark on his cheek, leaving her completely paralyzed, with lost eyes, and unable to utter a word. Turned to the one with long hair and a white shirt, her firmly by the hair, and pulled him back, asking him if he liked to play throwing of other Kim's hair. Knife in the hospital, isn't it? His look cold made the girl scared to the core. stuttering when he asked what he was going to do with that knife. A sharp cut tore the air, creating a trail of deadly blue light, accompanied by a cry, heartbreaking, that echoed all over the alley. Hyung's eyes, Xiaozhong shone with a blue light, full of intention, kills his face, remained impassive after the brutal warning blow. Witnessing the scene in black fell to the floor with his mouth open with fear, while Shanshan behind also covered his mouth, stunned and unable to speak. A sharp blow resonated when the white-shirted woman ran out of strength, kneeling on the floor with total impotence. The panicked girl touched her head with a pale face when he realized that a large part of her beautiful long hair had been cut off. With tears in the eyes, shouted furiously, cursing Hyung Siu Dong for being a bastard for daring to ruin his hair. Dong indifferently loosened the lock of black hair in front of her and coldly uttered a chilling phrase. Long hair would only be a useless burden in the future. Once he got rid of the scum, turned around and ordered Shanshan to leave immediately, leaving behind the defeated who looked at him in a dazed Shan. Shan still didn't understand what was going on in his face. Innocent showed extreme confusion when she was suddenly away. The car was Faigan Shaoyan. While driving, calmly announced the impending famine, discarding the idea that Shunzhen out to school to prioritize survival. Shunzhen helplessly scolded his grandmother for being so. I understand and believe in these meaningless fraudulent calls. Nanjayam. While driving he smiled with confidence, swearing secretly that he would protect the child at all costs in this life. He turned to interrupt the discussion, stating with certainty that the news of the famine had been leaked by the same, and it was not any kind of fraud. Shunzhen looked at the strainy driver with suspicious eyes, asking directly for the identity of the person who made it. The car was launched at full speed while Yun Baoiwon presented himself with authority, and at the same time, uttered a chilling phrase. These thugs would soon disappear, so there was no need to worry. The girl was still not coming out of her amazement, stuttering when asked if the terrible famine was really true. Hemu Xiaoyun lay down on the seat in total relaxation, admitting that the famine was just a story that he had invented to make it easier for his grandfather to understand. He sketched a curious appearance, and then revealed a truth 1,000 times more cruel. The real apocalypse was about to arrive. When listening to the words apocalypse, Shunzhen opened his eyes wide open, with his mouth open from the impact so great that he could not believe what Jin Shoiwon heard. Calmly told him to check his phone immediately. While Shunzhen, I was starting to sweat coal in the face of shocking news circulating online. Shanshan his phone and came across the horrible scene of a madman biting another person in broad daylight, being savagely contained by security guards, with a headline about rabies. The following news showed a warning about the return of a strange fog. The first signs of the end of days gradually appearing on the Shan touch screen. Shun pseudo cold. His hands were as he read the messages, desperate to relief of the victims who were being transformed, feeling a chill running down his back. The girl turned to ask with an expression stunned if the apocalypse was real, while Yang Shoyan followed, driving calmly, and claimed that all the signs had begun to appear as expected. The luxurious car slid gently down the highway as he advertised coldly. Then tomorrow, a deadly toxic fog would cover numerous provinces, starting hell on earth. He described a vision cruel of how the toxic fog would infiltrate, transforming a large part of the zombie population, bloodthirsty people they would hunt, the living on all the streets. Those that were not immediately transformed, nor would they escape a tragic fate, being torn apart and devoured alive by their own old congeners on the burning streets. Hem Shoyan added another shock by revealing the cruel rule that just by dying, victims would join immediately to that army of disgusting zombies with bright, deadly eyes. He looked in the rear-view mirror with a gaze, asking if today's youth knew what zombies were, making Shan admit with a babble, but still unable to assimilate the truth. Watching the flow of cars still moving peacefully in front of, he smiled with disdain, and said that we only had to wait until tomorrow, or next week, to see how insignificant words would become impossible to believe. Yang Dehuan looked at the poet ahead with an expression of frustration, casting a curse on this dead-end situation. The emergency lane as well was completely blocked by drivers. Irresponsible people who forced their way into a clear sample of the self-destructive cunning typical of a chaotic crowd. Grand Pally was very concerned that the zombies would catch up with them when the car stopped, but Hyun Choyeon calmly reassured him, saying that it was not yet time to panic. Although he spoke firmly in his mind, continued to calculate the risks. If an outbreak were to occur in the middle of this traffic jam, would be quite problematic. All of a sudden, a luxury car was thrown from behind at a speed. Design engine roar. Tearing the silence, the promising driver made a very sharp road cut to Hyun's car. Xiaozhong to get into the emergency lane, forcing him to brake abruptly to avoid a collision. Abrupt braking made the whole car wobble violently. Sean screamed in terror, and the boy, Lee, almost died from the unexpected impact. Blood rose to his head. Yang Shoiwon gritted his teeth and cursed the custom of the stupid driver not to use the. Without hesitation he turned the steering wheel to take revenge by declaring boldly that he would not get away with it. After messing with his father in Yang Shoyan's car, rammed the rear of the opposing vehicle without hesitation, teaching the other a lesson unforgettable about traffic laws in the apocalypse. The tenacious white car hit the side. The metallic screeching was deafening, as if defying the resistance of Hyun Xiaoyong's car. Hyun Xiaoyong squinted his eyes with murderous intent. I didn't expect that this brat still didn't know, and I would like to fight to the death to advance it. The two cars collided as limps the bumpers collided mercilessly. The battle for the lane had become a test of tenacity. The rich driver poked his head out through the window and did a flurry of obscenities. But he only received the cold of Yan. Toden when he saw but the opponent seemed with power. The angel trembled and advised patience, but Hyun Seo-jong just mocked by stating that he was ready to send anyone to hell who dared to get out of the car and look for trouble. Finally the traffic jam was cleared. The car escaped the grip and went off the ground after almost an hour immobilized. Before Chanson could recover, shouted a warning when he saw that the damn car accelerated again to try to overtake them again. Hyun clenched his teeth. Blood went to his head when he saw that this guy, persistent as a hungry leech, was still determined to look for problems until the end. He turned the steering wheel furiously, making the car slide like a beast, performing a skid that burned the asphalt to dodge the attack of the opponent as the angel Lee leaned forward, screaming in panic to get Yam to stop. Choyeon remained highly concentrated, determined not to let anyone get on his head. Jun Shaojun, with a look as cold as a knife, stated bluntly that given that the apocalypse would come tomorrow, why the hell should they continue to endure these pieces of paradise? He turned the steering wheel decisively. The car crashed directly into the side of the vehicle opponent with a shocking roar that made the metal squeak. The violent impact threw the rich man's car to one side. Sparks flew like celebrating the victory of the strongest. The luxurious car spun uncontrollably in a cloud of acrid smoke. The driver came out looking disheveled and was still cursing non-stop out of anger. He yelled at the phone, demanding to call to the traffic police to check the cameras on his face. Contorted that neck veins, swollen with impotence after being cheated by a brat. He got stuck in the middle of the road, looking at the taillights coming away, swearing that he would teach manners to the one who had just left. But now it was just words that move. The afternoon wind, the rollable base door, secret to open slowly with a dry squeak, welcoming her to the car, victorious, who returned safely on the silent night. The whole group got out of the car on Tuesday, rid, pale as death, quickly clung to the car door to recover from the deadly career they had just experienced. Shanzan opened his mouth with astonishment to witness the grandiose scale of the fortress, impregnable with its imposing giant watchtowers. Tonun coldly ordered everyone to rest and recover strength, because starting tomorrow, hell on earth would officially open its doors to welcome all kin. Choyeon remained silent in front of the huge window, contemplating the false peace before hell on earth. Shanshan will officially be stretched and yawned with a sigh of relief from escaping from school, while Yang Hyoyeon passed with an impassive expression, as if nothing had happened. He turned with a significant half rating making a gesture the girl to come and admire the work. Inside the fortress in which he had invested a fortune, Qiam Xiaoyum took the entire group for a walk around the lobby, showing off the walls of reinforced concrete and 3 centimeter thick door, strong enough to stop both tanks and zombies. He suddenly made a serious face, imposing martial law that apart from the three of them, it was strictly forbidden for anyone to come near. Inside the Shan fortress, Zampali wished her voice trembled as she made the question of whether they should let die the other young survivors. Hui Wen-te had not bothered to argue with the rookie, simply ordered him to boldly to follow him to face reality. He walked and explained the depravity of the heart, human in the apocalypse, stating that compassion at that time was no different than the boy reads. And Shanzhen were petrified by the railing, with eyes and mouth open with amazement to see the grandiose scale of the area below Heian. Dajun pointed to the bathroom, full of containers, giving the order that this was the only place where the outsiders could stay, and that the front door should not be opened under any circumstances in its absence. Hiao and Xiaoyan pulled the two rookies to the food store, explaining as they walked the rules of the game on the distribution of rations in times of chaos. The three entered a gigantic hole with shelves very high, a scale so grandiose that at the spectators he turned over with a sufficiency fracture, preparing for the next exhibition of its wealth in front of the mirror. Red and Shandan, Hiam Shajan activated mental eye skill. His left eye shone with a flame, blue to scan people's psychological state. In front of him for the first time, saw the icon of a green smiling face on Chanzen's heads, and the boy reads, a sign that absolute loyalty had been established. He stood proudly on a box, stating that the weapons were the truth of survival, and then invoked heavy weaponry from virtual space to Shanzhen reality. Was equipped with a high-quality crossbow and the red with a double-barrel shotgun. Both received the order, unbreakable, to protect their weapons as if they were their own lives. The boy pulled the gun on his hand. His eyes were firm, promising to deliver, absolutely, with the tough rules of this survival game. The system suddenly rang. A new mission that will require the rescue of a former colleague named Sanchi with a juicy points reward Kim. Toyon followed the huge wild cut in the sky, smiling with satisfaction, because the game had indicated the exact location of the alley he needed to find him. Tajib turned to give the final instructions to Shenzhen and Ali, emphasizing that under no circumstances should violate the rules of survival if they wanted to keep their small lives. The supercar roared and shot out of the base, following the enormously curious guide of the system to carry out the mission of recruiting new members. The target that appeared before his eyes was a crowded cafe where the neon lights were still dancing provocatively, before Grandma swallowed it all up. In the recording room, silver-haired Yan Shi shouted into the microphone together with his colleagues, unburdening all his sorrows without knowing that a Grady Sanchi was about to fall on them. Passed his arm through his friend's pocket from the glasses, both wobbled, helping each other to find the bathroom with the teacher. Sorry for the drunks. The sound of running water echoed in the bathroom, accompanied by laughter from men who were enjoying of a last moment of peace. Just leaving, the two drunks collided, with an elegant couple approaching, creating a tension-laden encounter. The woman with blonde hair and red dress let out a cry of pain, turning to glare with the gaze of the one who had hit her, with an expression of absolute. Sanchez sweated like crazy, quickly raised his hands to deeply apologize and calm the situation. But it seemed that the opponent was not easy to deal with. The man in front of him who accompanied him did not bother to reason, threw a kick that sent Shen flying. She far away for daring to bother the beautiful woman. The clap kick made Shan-chi flew backwards, hitting each other hard, back against the wall with a full of pain. His friend with the glasses rushed to help Shang-chi to get up, hailed as death at the sight of his best friend on the floor. Blood rose to his head. The friend of that glasses turned to yell at the guy in the suit, questioning why he had acted with such cruelty. The guy in the suit frowned with murderous intent. I did not expect this group of insignificant dare to contradict his precious words. In front of the beautiful woman, without saying anything else, the bully, firmly the collar of the shirt of the friend with the glasses and lifted him into the air, while Angie was in a hurry to step in and take all the blame. Right at the most critical moment, a waiter complaining about a cold approach. Looking with resignation at the family member, scene of chaos in front of him, the waiter quickly jumped into the crowd using all their strength to separate the two parties and to ask for continuously to the gods who will calm down. The guy in the suit glared at him with his eyes and screamed, roaring menacingly. If anyone knew who his father was, to dare to touch his beautiful wife. Knowing that he had stumbled upon a beast, the waiter sweated. He plied and whispered to the two drunks to leave quickly, because they would not be able to pay for the damages, while the tycoon changed his target to grab the poor waiter by the neck and threatened to close the premises. Sanchi and his friend took the opportunity to flee in a hurry. Sanchi and the friend with the glasses is 3090 broke in the room, like lost souls, interrupting the fun of his friends. That's Sanyan sigh. At the sight of his two friends in a daze, the student in the gray jacket with the microphone in his hand asked sarcastically if they had been chased by a dog, rabid to make them run like this. Sanchi panting, he recounted his encounter with the gangsters, while the friend in the glasses was shivering, bragging about their fate, having been protected by the waiter, which allowed him to escape. With boiling blue blood, Shen Chong rose with a jump, shouting that he would call the entire department of mechanical engineering to fight to the death against the enemy and restore the honor of his brothers. Fearing that the matter would become fractured and affect his diploma, Sanchi rushed to his impulsive friend, him to let it go, to continue the fun in banking cowardice. The door to the room was knocked down unexpectedly by a powerful kick, startling everyone and pointing out that they had arrived. The man in front leading his revenge group entered with murderous intent, and his henchmen, they called the waiter, already beaten and bruised, as a warning when he saw that Yan Xiaoyan had arrived at his door. Yan Shi and Chen Chong turned pale as wax. Completely paralyzed by the overwhelming pressure, the man in front pointed out and ordered the arrest, and his henchmen immediately formed an encirclement. One of them, with a baseball bat, was ready to crush anyone who dared to cross. The result was, as the students knelt, covering his head in a humiliating submission, the poor man waiter was beaten again with a punch in the stomach by a bully. Shinchon shrunk, covering his head, while the henchman defied him with a gesture, stopping any attempt of weak students to call for help by phone. Without saying a word, the man in front wielded a bottle of liquor and crashed it into his opponent's head, accompanied by an authoritarian cry. Fresh-blooded everywhere. Chinchon let out a heartbreaking cry, while an unbearable pain invaded him, and the red blood clouded his sight. Outside the center of Yang's supercar, Dota performed a skid, burying arrows, and stopped gently high in the car with a head full of arrogance, dropping comments, sarcastic about students' naivety when choosing that location for fun. With their hands on their shoulder, climbed the steps to the tiger's lair. His attitude, confident and dominant, made the two door guards lower their heads with respect. The scene in the room was desolate. Shin Chong lay motionless on the bloody ground, while the man in front was still holding his neck, sharpening of the bottle in his hand. The man in front of him turned to hug the woman, to ingratiate herself, but she too, coldly than the brat who already there was not the one who had collided with his car. Immediately pointed the microphone at Sanchi's face, that trembled like a leaf, forcing this coward to confirm the identity of the person they were looking for. At that critical moment, a hand rushed to grab the glass ashtray from the table, with the intention of continuing desperately. Dinchman pounced to subdue Chen Chong, while he continued to fight and resist desperately. The man in front smiled with disdain, releasing comments sarcastic about the boldness of these poor and humble people. Students, without saying a word, wielded his hand and struck hard the bottle of wine on Chen Chong's head, creating a roar, metallic and spreading crystal fragments. Fresh blood gushed out. Chen Chong collapsed on the floor under the watchful eye of horror, absolute of Sanchi and the friend of glasses. I just saw his friend being tortured. Yan Shi cast a curse and threw himself directly into the enemy encirclement to risk his life. As the friend in the glasses shrunk in fear in the chair, the man ordered his Henchman who will kill someone to teach a lesson. Unexpectedly, the henchman called Lao. San suddenly put his hands in his pocket, gasping and sweated profusely with unusual eagerness. Sanchi launched a powerful hook to the face of the black-shirted bully that blocked the road, showing a rare glimpse of manhood. Laosan had been completely transformed, with white eyes shining. Ignoring his colleagues who insulted him by calling him cowardly, the corpse roared wildly and jumped into the crowd, officialing a bloody catastrophe at the sight. Pounced and bit the chest of the black-shirted bully, making him moan in extreme pain. The woman screamed hysterically while the bully thirst, desperate to be bitten by the chest like a dog. Babid, the friend in the glasses, covered his head, screaming in panic. Completely terrified by the horrible scene, bloody a henchman in a vest. Gray pounced to try to separate the osa, but was surprised by the brutal force of the poison. The mirror turned abruptly and bit the hand of the person bothering him, his red eyes shining with a thirst for crazed blood. With a powerful push, Lawson crushed the henchman of the vest, Gray against the ground with one blow, deaf and heavy, completely dominating its weak prey. A hand of steel unexpectedly appeared from behind, grabbing the back of the head of the zombie as if it were a hyonchik. San in the air with one hand, listened to the surrounding thugs petrified with terror. Bane waved his hand and crashed the angel into the glass table, making the fragments fly everywhere with terrifying force. Yan nailed the squirming bite to the wall, cracked, and with an authoritarian voice, ordered the mob to. The white-shirted henchman was sweating like crazy, terrified to see a brat subdue with one hand to a monster as strong as a bull. The man in front shouted angrily, with exorbitant eyes, demanding to know the identity of the stranger who had just ruined his fun. Hyung Xiaojian ignored the man in front of him, turned to Sanchi with a serious expression, and asked him if he had been bitten. Yun. She looked up, stunned, and quickly denied having been injured. With an expression of confusion and concern, Yan Xiaoyan did not give many explanations, simply ordered Sanchi to follow him immediately. The man in front Sanchi by the shoulder, holding him back, and aggressively declared that no one could leave until the matter was resolved. An infected henchman staggered, covering his head, moaning from an unusual dizziness, while his colleagues thought I'd only had a mild cold. Taiwan looked at him with a cold look, like a blade when detecting the signs of infection. The henchman was sweating profusely, murmuring that his illness had worsened too quickly for being a common evening cold. Yang Xiaoyan exposed the wound in the henchman's chest and questioned the origin of the bite. Receiving a challenging and stupid response, Yang Xiaoyan sentenced coldly, then with the bite so close to the brain, the man was about to become a zombie. Without hesitation for a second, the henchman, infected by the neck, and him away towards the door as if it were an iron sack. With a powerful young throw, Xiaoyan threw the source of straight into the hallway to the horror of darkness, slammed the door shut, and secured it by cutting decisively the way back for the one who had just been eliminated. Ignoring the loud knocks on the door behind him, Yan it quietly and made fun of the zombies were not yet smart enough to know how to open a door. Turned to face the remaining players in the room, thick and broadcasting a aura so overwhelming that the atmosphere became dense. With eyes shining with killer intention, Yan Xiaoyan crossed his knuckles and came out directly to Yang Jia, who of that rabble needed to clean up. Sanchi stood still without understanding what was happening, while the man, Diamond, who began to sweat, deep under invisible pressure, they just endured scorn. The man in front shouted that this brat was too much excuses and pounced to throw a punch. But before it could reach its goal, Yan Xiaojan's big fist his face, stopping the attack with the speed of the bang ray. Yan Xiaoyang did not say much. The man's head, Diamond, and crashed it into the glass table, shattering her in the face of the horror of her henchman. Seeing his boss being mistreated, the bully in the black shirt pounced, insulting Yan it bastard, and screaming that he was looking for death. Slap in the face. Before I could finish the sentence, Yan Xiaoyan punched him in the mouth with a devastating punch, causing his head to backfire and the blood to everywhere. Yang Xiaoyan will stand upright and proud, looking at the man in front of him who lay with its back to the ground, with an expression of absolute. The black-shirted bully who had just been beaten now, laying on the ground, with white eyes and foaming at the mouth, as an epileptic due to the severe injury. His colleagues were quick to check it out. As pale as wax all, see his comrade completely incapacitated with a single punch from Hyang Xiaojun. Hyang Xiaojun clenched his fist, and radiating an overwhelming, killer intention, and challenged anyone who was not yet there, and would like to test his fists to bring him closer to the turn to order Sanchi to take his friends out, and wait outside. His authoritarian attitude meant that the other could only feel obediently. Sanchi, together with his eyewear friend, responded quickly. The young man in the gray jacket, wounded to leave the room full of the smell of gunpowder. The man in front of his face, swollen, also rose with difficulty, being helped by his henchman, while murmured the order of retreat in the midst of total humiliation. The young master, Diamond, blocked the way. Her first act with arrogance to teach a lesson to Fan Xiaoyong right in front of the woman in the red dress that babbled about how Hyang Xiaoyong almost killed his brothers, but only received a look of in return, as if he saw a lot of hearts. Without wasting time with someone who would soon die on, Xiaoyong threw a withering kick in the middle of his chest, making the mouthpiece fly backwards. The powerful kick made him slide across the ground, violently crashing into the door of the room, that where deathstalk he beat. Frantically the glass screaming to come out, with the face disengaged by fury and extreme fear, realizing that he was locked in. Inside the room, Lawson had completely lost his humanity. Their eyes as red as fire, and the marked veins on his face announced their bloodlust on Tuesday. Let out a terrifying roar and lunged directly at his trapped prey, making the young master would die of fear. Hyun held the door and from the outside, ignoring the punches and screams, desperate help that echoed inside. The manager of the lobby came running to the armed young poet, ordered to lock the door and call the police on a case of dangerous to rabies when he hears of an epidemic. The manager turned pale as a dead man, sweating my ass off believing that blatant lies. Sean glared at him and shouted at him to force him to obey without request, scaring him so much that his tongue got stuck and he could only to hear heartbreaking screams emerged from within. But the cold hand from the outside had already locked the door, turning the room into an attempt to bury alive to those rich corpses. After of Grandma Yan out on interest to his friends, bewildered, and made them a sign to withdraw immediately. Before everything was discovered, the two employees in the hallway began to sweat coal, listening to the roars and the crunch of bones coming from the VIP room. Doubted the alleged anger that the customer warned them of, but a fear, invisible to those strange sounds, began to invade them. I just painted his mortal chest, one of them invited his colleague to check the security cameras, live to see what was really going on inside. In the control room, the faces of the three employees deformed, and their eyes wide opened. Horror extreme by witnessing an earthly hell on the screen. On the interfered screen, Lausa devoured the young master, while the woman in the red dress lay in a pool of blood waiting to die. Babbling calls to the police desperately. Ignoring the incipient chaos, Yang Xiaoyong started the vehicle and urged his colleagues to abandon quickly that nest of death. As the place was about to fall completely, the car was launched into the night, leaving behind the food that was gradually transformed into a slaughterhouse, bloody over the zombie pandemic. Sanchi still in shock in the back seat, thanked and worried about true identity of the leader who had just saved their lives. Yang Xiaoyong coldly made up a reasonable excuse, stating he had a bodyguard hired to protect the target, hiding that it had just been reborn. Despite narrowly escaping, Sanchi spoke early about rabies flu. Humane since the keyboard warriors on the internet. They said it was fake news. The friend of glasses, sitting next to him, he also intervened, trembling with hope, asking if there was any specific treatment for this damn disease. Xiao Yuan looked at them in the rear view mirror coldly, and threw a bucket of cold water at them by declaring that the world had entered officially in the age of the apocalypse. As they talked about this, heard a roar, and the whole car shook violently, making the young people in the back, a zombie will jump out of fright. frantically clung to the hood, screaming and scratching the windshield. What made Sanchi's group scream? Terrified to realize that rage was real kin. John unlanded with a cold head, accelerated to throw the suspect, and explained that this was only a slight warming of the pandemic. Before everything got out of control, gave one last blunt. If they wanted to live, they had to obey his orders blindly. Making Sanchi and the others were frightened by calling him brother. Continue with its mission. The system panel appeared confirming the mission of message from his former Hyun Xiaoyong colleagues. Smiled at the sight of the 20 reward points. Log into your account to buy new Hyun Xiaoyong toys. Search the system store with a look. Considering purchasing the fake grower package, supplies and weapons, or spend points to refresh the list. With the mentality of a rich man, Yang Xiaoyuan decided not to choose and to take the 3 quality items, for it would soon reach its safe fortress anyway. Looked in the rearview mirror with suspicion, and in his mind, doubts began to arise on the loyalty of his classmates, who were sitting in silence, absolute behind. Memories of his past life have returned. The image of Sanchi, crying inconsolably, she appeared vividly, for his entire bedroom had been slaughtered by zombies due to a traitor Han. Ouyam squinted his eyes, analyzing each face and their memories to find the traitor, wondering who was present. Was that Dan infiltrator? The scene changes to a luxury apartment complex, where a girl's sweet voice resounds from a lighted floor, asking about the person's situation. On the other side of the line, Puijin spoke on the phone in an anxious and provocative manner, complaining about the outer chaos and pretending to weakness and fear of going to the supermarket to beg supplies. Suddenly, a few loud and quick knocks on the door made Puijin will jump out of fright. His face changed color due to panic. Not understanding what was going on, Puijin searched for quickly an excuse to suffer with extreme anxiety, informing that someone knocked on the door and that he could not go on with this interested conversation. Puijin shivered up to the peephole at the door, with the heart literally for fear that they would be zombies or debt collectors in these times of chaos. The door opened and turned out to be her best friend. Just enter. Began to speak out loud, complaining, and then gossiping about the unfortunate neighbor they had just taken. The friend exaggerated the story by gesticulating, while counting how the police and ambulance had taken to the whole family. Neighbor with a dramatic expression. Puijin was astonished to hear it. Taking his hand to his mouth, thoughtful, finally understanding why this luxury complex was so rowdy. This morning, the friend immediately showed her pragmatic nature, asking if Li Shuzhen had already brought supplies, but received only a sigh and a negative gesture from Kuiying. She left aside the current boyfriend's issue and urged Puijin to call Yang Daomi, and immediately, after sniffing the money emanating from his huge corpse, it turned out that this woman was just as malicious. Crossed his arms with enough, admitting that he had sent Yang to be followed by Weiwen and discovered that it was carrying supplies to an abandoned factory. John opened his eyes in amazement. His slow brain finally understood that the ex-boyfriend she left seemed to know of the pandemic beforehand and prepared everything. The friend's face showed extreme greed, fantasizing about the idea that it could making a fortune out of Yang's preparation. Time. The sports car was launched at full speed towards the base, breaking sharp light and burning smiles in the middle of the silent night. The return of its owner. All got out of the car with difficulty except Chenchun, who was still sleeping deeply like a drifting log, and had to be helped by his colleagues. Santi stayed, gawking at the imposing scale of the fortress, exclaiming with astonishment about the incredible solidity of the site. Hyun Xiaoyong sketched an appearance of sufficiency, admitting that anyone who came here for the first time he was just as shocked. Grandpa Li came running to meet them, with a pale face of concern, asking if the boss had suffered a scratch after the trip. Dong Yahello reassured everyone and then presented solemnly to new recruits. To core members, who were on duty, pointed to Sanchi's group and his classmates, declaring that they would be his new teammates from now on. On Tuesday, Li and Shanzhen immediately changed their attitude, welcoming warmly, fully confident in the decision to recruit. Hyun ordered Commander Li to explain the rules of the jungle, making the Oju sweat cold, thinking it was over in a human trafficking concentration camp in northern Immer. In the midst of the suffocating atmosphere of pressure, Lao Chu raised his hand trembling, with the intention of saying something. With a face full of fear, Jimin boldly to be given firearms immediately, so that they could help defend the fortress. Young Choyun looked at him with knife-sharp eyes, assessing the impatience and recklessness of the new recruit. Lao Chu scared, bowed and whispered to Jimin him not to demand too much. Before gaining confidence, Kyung Shoyun reassured the group with a promise, firm that the weapons would be in his hands in the coming days. Realizing that Chen Chung was seriously injured, Young Shoyun ordered immediately to be taken to the infirmary for urgent checkup. After a good shower, Chen Chung dried his hair with a sensation of freshness while Jimin maintained an expression of resentment. Jimin turned to Lao Tao, questioning him why he had prevented him from asking for weapons earlier, pointed to the ground in frustration, arguing that the current situation was like being under house arrest under the pretext of being protected. Lotto hurried to reassure his friend, reminding him that after all Yang Xiaoyun was his savior. Chen was still not convinced, repeatedly questioning the alleged Jian employer. While Jin Che was listening in silence, Jimin gritted his teeth, instilling in their partners the idea that nursing was so solid and isolated as a maximum security prison. Spread the rumor that Hyung Seojung planned to extract Chen Chong's organs, inciting the group to attack by surprise before it was too late. Ruling out the hesitation of his colleagues, Jimin said the philosophy of Cao Cao was better betray others than be betrayed by them. To justify his plan to seize the fortress, its nature bestial was revealed when he planned to the assassin Li and abused the little one, Johnson, while the owner of the house was playing. Both Sanchi and Latsu were petrified, speechless in the face of depravity and cruelty of his roommate. Seeing the unfavorable reaction, Jimin changed his attitude faster than a pancake, laughing and hands, saying he was just to test them. From the list, dried the sweat on his forehead with a sigh of relief, replying that if Hyung Xiaoyun would like to extract organs, I wouldn't need so many detours having a gun. Dripping water in the bathroom fell on the cold, tiled floor, plunging space into silence, uncomfortable and full of distrust. Seeing the backs of his two friends walking away, Jimin mocked his weakness and secretly swore that he would turn them all into slaves when he will take power. In the main hall, Yang Xiaoyan was sitting relaxed on the sofa, cross-legged, while he was Li brought his granddaughter Shanshan to report the situation. Shenbo respectfully reported that all entries had been carefully sealed, and that the injured student Chen Chong was recovering in the infirmary. Chun Choyan smiled and thanked, ordering the governor, Li, and Shanzhen to go to rest quickly, to prepare oneself mentally for the events of the following day. Suddenly remembering an important issue, lifted a finger to call the Red and give it one last instruction before they leave. Squinted and warned Shen, who to keep a close eye on these two classmates, because his told him that there was a traitor lurking in the group. After his subordinates left, young Xiaojun entered alone into the vast desert, his figure projecting a long shadow on the ground under the cold blue light. Activated the system interface, reviewing the items in the store, with the expression one player about to spend it all. Without hesitation, his finger repeatedly touched the virtual screen to purchase supply packages, random and increase the strength potential. A dazzling light burst, accompanied by a jingle, continuous, that signaled the success of the regulation of farmer packages, food and weapons, consuming a good amount of accumulated points. The system in number, a series of cool booties that included seeds, hundreds of kilos of stewed meat, sausages, and most importantly, 1,500 freshly made 9mm bullets. At the sight of the pile of goods that Yan had just appeared, Jadon stated with satisfaction that his courage in the apocalypse was more precious than a mountain of money. Moscow at present. 3 vehicles, Deuce crossed the bridge at full speed. The roar of its engines heralded the imminent arrival of a storm of violence. The caravan of vehicles braked abruptly in front of the gate of the fortress. The band leader went down, checking the address on your phone, with an expression so carefree as if she were taking a walk. The bullies, armed with machetes and clubs, scattered like a swarm of bees, while the leader of the gang quietly closed a telephone dinner deal. As if killing people is an isolated matter, the band leader hung up, pointing out and ordering that break down the door with a burning fury. Wanting to raise the sight immediately, the thugs threw themselves like moths into the flame, kicking and knocking on the gigantic steel door, producing blows against the armor. A bully, sweating his ass off, ran to report that the door was as thick as the armor of a tank, and that normal human strength and those useless toys could not break it. The leader of the gang gritted his teeth, cursing with voice on neck, without understanding how crazy, had installed a door, bulletproof several centimeters thick, in a civilian house, shouted out loud ordering the firearms to be removed. Two thugs, immediately loaded with difficulty, a heavy wooden box of car trunk to solve the problem. The box cover was opened, revealing a pile of homemade Molotov cocktails, which showed that they had prepared a plan to burn everything that got in his way. Cocktail bottles, Molotov and flames were thrown into the air, drawing mortal killers on their way directly to the fortress, with the intention of roasting those who were inside. Molotov cocktail bottles in passing above the walls, exploding in bright fireballs that threatened with incinerate the solid strength. A dense black smoke rose from the roof, making all the equipment in the yard will look up with concern, realizing that the enemies outside were not just anything. A glass bottle filled with fuel crashed into the roof, breaking into pieces, ending a flare of fire that spread across the entire surface of the Shunzhen building. Terrified, she ran at full speed with a bucket of water, followed by the Colombian Lee that carried a red fire extinguisher to put out the fire before it caused great damage. While running, Chanshan shouted instructions to put out the soaking fire. Ain sweat upon realizing that Hang's warnings about the apocalypse had become a cruel reality, while the darkness was to put out the fire. Yang Xiaoyun, with a cold thirst for blood, Itabel with his shotgun, and next to him was the Li, wielding a rifle from home to support it both. He immediately climbed into the imposing watchtower. Chen Xiaoyun, while closing his eyes, looking down, and stating that he wanted to see who was so bold as to come here to seek death. From its advantageous position, Yang, the line of luxury cars ostentatiously parked in the street, and immediately select the family vehicle of his old enemy. The Li, startled by recognizing to the driver that had caused problems on the highway, and at the same time was shocked by Han Xiaoyun's vision. The old man looked at the watchtower with an expression of astonishment. I just believed that this boy could discern the identity of the enemy from such a distant distance. The bullies below cheered and pointed out when they discovered the objective, confirming that he was the brat his boss was looking for. The gang leader pointed to the sky, noisily cursing and threatening to burn that kennel if Yang Xiaoyun did not come down. Yang Xiaoyun looked down with a glance, as he giving an ultimatum to those insignificant 5 minutes to disappear from their sight or face the consequences of. The band leader was not only not afraid, but shouted a challenge, wielding a bottle of gasoline and ordering their thugs who brought 2 boxes more hot merchandise to go all out. A blue mission notification panel appeared unexpectedly in front of Jian Xiaoyun, pointing out that the time had come to accumulate points. While the boy reads was still hesitant to suggest a warning shot into the air, the system had already assigned mission threat, common with the requirement to eliminate enemies as quickly as possible to obtain 10 points. Yan Xiaodan clutched the rifle in his hand, discarding any idea of clemency. For those bastards who dared to set on fire and kill, they no longer had any humanity worthy of warning. Raised the gun and aimed with convinced precision. Tuula, that scum survived in the apocalypse, would only cause misfortunes. The innocent and himself bang. A roar resounded, the cannon spat fire, tearing apart the silence, the bullet causing the gang to. Leader's face was startled. Diamond turned to horror, feeling death closely brushing the bullet, and embedded himself directly in the gang's arm. Leader, who shouted desperately, fresh blood, at the extreme astonishment of the henchmen surrounding him, Yang Xiaoyun snapped his tongue and cursed because the shot had been deflected, reproached himself for being rusty after so much peace time. But he still realized that the gang also had rifles. Leader with bloody arm ran desperately toward the off-road vehicle, still trying to release some empty threats while urging his henchmen to withdraw immediately. Who with coldness, rested his cheek on the butt of the rifle, and continued pointing, declaring without rodeos I hate it, and that he was determined to put an end to this riffraff today. The shot resounded sharply, and two henchmen fleeing in a hurry fell instantly, with accurate bullets their head and chest. Inside the car the gang hailed leader as an angel screamed. The driver who stepped on the accelerator and immediately fled before he was riddled. When he saw that the enemy was trying to escape in the young car, that he was worried, and continued firing, claiming that this rifle, automatic, was born for difficult cases such as this. The expensive vehicle, SUV, was destroyed by the hail of bullets. The crystals burst and sparks flew everywhere, while the bodywork of steel twisted under the overwhelming fire without ammunition. Yang Xiaoyan recharged the charger quickly and decisively. Without a single superfluous movement, the old casings came out, flying while his eyes remained fixed on the target. Shenbo was petrified. Sweat was running in abundance as he witnessed the superior ability of the young man to shoot from the hip and reload, a level that even a veteran like him should admire and wonder where he came from. The roar of gunfire resounded under the blue sky, sending to the other world a few who dared to approach the territory of the country. The Malatek's all-terrain vehicle fled at full speed. I love henchmen, with their cold bodies lying on the asphalt in front of the entrance to the fortress. Then, Xiaoyong passed with a rifle on his shoulder and a cold expression, ordering Chen Bo to call Chanchi and the others to clear the bloody. Suddenly stopped. Their cold eyes shone with a flash of calculation, cruel in conceiving an idea, much more practical. Instead of cleaning young angels, God into said, it's to let them transform into zombie, to serve as living targets for practice, for their partners, which made Shin Basudara cold on hearing the leader's cruelty. Elsewhere, a luxurious white car was advancing along the highway in the direction of the area of the fortress. A fat rich man, dressed in a white suit, drove with an anxious expression, turning to ask if they were already near the meeting place. Sitting in the back seat, fine with a mellow and false voice, showed the way to paradise, telling him that they were about to arrive at the next crossing. Her best friend, sitting next to, stood with, and whispered, unmasking Kine for exaggerating his performance whenever it came to the delusion issues. The car stopped. The Argentine Republican promised to park outside and wait, asking his grandmother to send him a message when I will finish, not knowing at all that he was just a expendable pawn. Kine got out of the car with an elegant attitude, making a sign decisive to her best friend to follow her in the face of the latter's perplexity. Ignoring her friend's complaints, on foot pain from Quang heels, said he needed someone to tell him to accurately identify the factory. Wujing unceremoniously her friend, paying attention, omission of her screams about the bag and the phone that they had stayed in the car. From the driver's seat the suspect observed the backs of the two girls as they drifted apart in a hurry, while Wujing reassured her friend, telling him I have already found the phone. As soon as the two Dans disappeared from view, El fat rich man revealed its true nature, less simple than it seemed, making a call with serious expression and ordering their henchmen to prepare for action. Elsewhere, the command vehicle of Hiam Shaojong side accelerated and departed by sending a signal to the caravan of vehicles closely following him to carry out the cleanup mission. Inside the truck, formally confirmed the walkie-talkie order while Chanchi and workers wielded machetes with iron fence ready to make zombie bites. Returning the two girls, her best friend grumbled as she walked, reproaching Quang for getting her into this mess. Her best friend came clean, smiling with disdain and admitting that he had dressed Thaksay to seduce Yang Xiaoyuan because he was aware of the murky relationship between Quang and Le Shuaqian. Discussion of the two hypocrites was interrupted when both were stunned, with eyes wide open. The chaotic scene that unfolded in front of them. Putin and her friend were paralyzed when they witnessed the bloody scene with angels scattered in wrecked cars on the road. while her friend trembled like a leaf and wanted to return. Shine happened with coldness next to the angels, and deduced that this was the result of a purge for the struggle of resources. At the sight of the alleged murder of the gang leader, Shine smiled with disdain, thinking that Hyun Xiaoyong had died. But she only cared if the supply cut was intact, ignoring her friend's weak warning. The manipulator made a gesture of silence and approached stealthily to the door of the factory to investigate the situation. A deformed face with exorbitant eyes suddenly appeared through the crack. Both of them were startled, and almost the heart came out. The two girls stayed alone in front of the huge, solid iron door, realizing that the place was built with the firmness of a fortress. Impregnable Coin knocked on the door hermetically sealed with, frustrated by not being able to discern any movement inside. A loud cry from above echoed, causing the two intruders to will turn startled with expressions of bewilderment. Shanzhen was in the watchtower with an attitude incredibly cool, wielding a crossbow and with a cold look, questioning the identity of the two strangers. To see someone you know, Dine changed his attitude faster than lightning, waved his hands frantically and shamelessly, introduced herself as the girlfriend of Jin Xiaoyong to get Shanzhen entry, turned around and quickly informed him, the boss over the two women, that they were putting on a show and claiming be something they were not at the door. Seeing the shameless attitude of his former love, Jin whispered to Wenchu since he already had a new girlfriend and expressed concern about the crossbow in Shanzhen's hands. The manipulator reassured her accomplice, telling him that Li Shuixian had brought firearms, and that if they managed to open the door, Yang Zhoyan would be finished. Hyang Xiaowen responded to the jury with a cold expression, questioning the reason why the two hypocrites, when Shoya and Kuijin dared to show up there, without bothering to discuss, immediately activated his mental eye ability to see through the dark hearts of his opponents. Under the eye of truth, the false proof of concern between the two was unmasked, revealing their hostile and bloody intentions in their heads. He smiled with disdain and stated directly his plan of ambush, immediately asking about the location and power of insurgent fire that was hidden. The lethal question left the two paralyzed, pale as death, without understanding how his plan had been conceived. Bang! Before they could recover, Yang Zhoyan fired, plowing the ground right at the feet of the two intruders, making them jump in terror. Gun smoke rose from the barrel of the silver gun. He looked at them with murderous intent. Even though Kui Jin screamed and reproached him for being crazy, Kui Jin was still trying to show himself strong, reassuring a trembling Wen Shuya. As he looked up and challenged Yan Zhoyan to see if he dared to shoot Hyun, Taoyong looked at them with a mocking and derogatory smile, bluntly sentencing to give them lead would be too soft. A strange moan echoed from behind, causing the two of them to will turn startled. The cold sweat began to gush out in abundance. Both stayed petrified at the sight of those infected with faces deformed that were approaching, staggering, with hungry eyes of fresh flesh. The eyes of Hyang Xiaoyong shone with a mystical blue light, coldly sentenced the two traitors to death. I wish the zombies would tear them to pieces. The suit monster roared horribly, showing their irregular teeth as it pounced on the trembling prey. Fi Jane and Wen Suya screamed in terror, running at full speed to escape from the clutches of death that lurked right behind, sitting in the Lixian car. When listening to the chaotic screams, poked his head out with an expression of bewilderment, not understanding what was happening. The two girls, crying and running for their lives to the car, shouted Lisa Oxium's name, desperately asking for help, while zombies chased them closely. Li Shuxian paled and cursed to see the crazed crowd rushing. Realizing that the plan of ambush had failed completely, Li Shuxian sweated coal, screaming down the walkie-talkie to turn the emergency car around. Realizing that the pandemic of insanity was out of control, the car skidded burning, turned around and fled, ignoring the desperate insults from his accomplices abandoned behind, pale as death. Ran and screamed desperately to feel the breath of death of zombies just behind the back of his head. At that moment of life or death, the true human nature was revealed when a hand, cruel spread unexpectedly to block the road of his partner in search of her own survival. The bag strap turned into a murderous weapon. Indirect entanglement, strongly on the victim's ankle, and making her lose her balance for an instant. Gwen Shuya fell face down on the asphalt with a sharp blow, losing completely the opportunity to escape the scythe of death. The horde of zombies, hungry, he immediately pounced like wild beasts, opening their mouths and roaring as they surrounded the unfortunate prey that was already defenseless. Winshu already shouted Kui Jin's name with extreme hatred while the heroes were tearing her apart, in fresh blood all over the screen. Kui Jin ran at full speed with a smile, murmuring curses against her friend, who deserved it, as I left behind the bloody festing kin. Notification and system points, after the threat was eliminated. Receiving at the same time, a challenging new Qiang cleansing mission. Pale as death with a trembling voice. Could not believe what his eyes saw, when seeing a person, long live becoming a zombie in an instant. Chen Xiaojun coldly threw a bucket of cold water over reality, stating that the virus had spread through the air, and that the weak or wounded would be the first prey of death. Without wasting a second in fear, rose up suddenly with the attitude of a ruler, and ordered, convene an emergency meeting immediately. The whole group met quickly, around the round table under the supervision of Guaying. The atmosphere in the room was so heavy as lead while awaiting the leader's verdict. Hiam Choyong gave the ultimate survival director to trench at home for the next 2 days, for the body to adapt to the concentration of the virus that enveloped the world. Sanchi could not hide the concern in his face, and hesitated before asking about his brother's fate. Chenchon, who was in coma, Chenchon already did, paralyzed in hospital bed with pale face, his life as fragile as a sail in the wind, as his body had received too much of a blow. Every vein in his hand began to turn to a frightening dark purple color, accompanied by the sound of writhing bones, a clear sign that death had knocked on his door. The virus devastated Chenchon's body at breakneck speed. The black veins were through his neck, making him grit his teeth to endure pain, unbearable. In the meantime, outside, the whole city had become officially in hell on earth, with smoke and fire everywhere and people trampling each other to escape. San Chen was by the window, watching the chaotic streets, sweating deeply before the vision of the apocalypse that is hovered before his eyes. Returned to the house with a serious expression, ordering Sha'alit and Shuaj should be barricaded it absolutely, and opened the door to no one but him with blows. Frenetic at the door resounded as a call from beyond the grave, breaking the silence, and making the whole family was startled by extreme fear. Sanchez gritted his teeth with suspicion. The tension was evident in his face, while the knocking on the door became increasingly aggressive and urgent. Put a finger in his mouth, indicating absolute silence, what made his wife and children hold their breath and cover their mouths, not to emit any sound. Firmly wielding a golf club as a weapon of defense, advanced cautiously toward the door when he heard a family member. Tai was coming from outside. By recognizing the familiar voice of his friend Yan, Tao Sai relieved, and stupidly let his deadly guard down to zero. His hand turned the doorknob decisively without knowing at all that I was opening the door to a pack of hungry wolves. As soon as the door opened, a devastating kick hit him directly in the chest, making San Shang fly backwards. Throwing a delicious cry, Yang Tao led his thugs who broke into the house like a swarm of bees to subdue the owner, proving to be the world's most despicable traitors. Yang Tao will stand up as a winner, ordering his thugs to restrain Chang Chen Chen against the cold ground, even though the owner was screaming for his release. Chang Chen Chen looked with his eyes deorbited from the man he once considered his brother, shouting with extreme indignation, not believing that his goodness would have fed a snake in its bosom. Yan Tao mocked with, revealing their long-standing envy and jealousy, since he thought it was just a dumb of messages in the eyes of the boss, extended his arms, and shouted greedily, demanding that San Sheng to deliver immediately the keys to the castle and the secret address, to compensate for the years of being a subordinate. Despite being subjected to, San Sheng clenched his teeth. I love absolute silence, and playing the violinist of his old friend, with a fiery look. Seeing that torture did not work, Yang Tao sketched an evil trajectory and diverted his target to Shaoli and his son, who were trembling in the corner of the room. Abruptly Shaoli's hair and pulled back. Loud eyes of pain forcing Jung Chen to witness the brutal torture of his wife. I just endured seeing his mother being harassed. The little boy Shui put aside his fear and threw himself directly towards the villain with the eyes, tearful but full of determination. The boy used all his strength to bite Yang's leg, down, making the traitor sorry for the pain and cursing over the unexpected attack. Enraged by the young bite, Dao slapped a devastating slap that sent the child flying. I need a red mark bright on her cheek amidst the heartbreaking cries of mother saying. Shen screamed helplessly, defying Yang Tao to a duel and asking him to release his wife and children, while the small Shui was crushed to the ground by the bullies. Yang Tao crossed his arms and mocked with arrogance, promising preserving the life of Sanshan's wife and children will be if he agreed to guide him docilely to the secret mirror immediately. The rollable door of the mirror rose slowly, revealing the dark interior space in the face of the expectation of the young supply-hungry vultures. Tao led his bullies, who entered with an anxious expression, believing that they were about to find a gold mine of provisions to proclaim themselves kings. The smile on his lips faded at the sight of the corpse, empty with only a few boxes scattered since Sancheng had sold everything in large numbers. Former customers rubbed his chin, thoughtful, linking the events and immediately remembering the name of Deng Shen, the one who had been frantically porting goods. Lately greed as reservist, and Yang Tao stated that if they were able to steal the enormous supply store and the fortress of Dongchaoyu, all would live comfortably the rest of their lives without worries. Sanchen rushed to intervene, warning that Gun Xiaoyan was not someone to pick on, since I had seen it with a gun and seemed to have recorded about this catastrophe in advance. Ignoring the warning about the deadly danger, Yang Tao smiled with and cruelly stated that this was a problem that from Sanshan would have to solve for himself. Forced Sanshan Young's corpse to be stolen, to an instant for his wife and his lot, considering it a fair exchange to the point of cruelty. Zhenbo sweated his face deeply, crumpled by concern, when listening to the sounds unusual that came from the room of isolation. A wild roar resonated all over the sky on the base. That death had knocked on the door inside the fortress. Ushajan and his group of siblings were paralyzed, watching Chenchong squirm in the hospital bed. Its heartbreaking screams made the air as heavy as lead. The virus had completely taken over the body of the guest, transforming a Chen Chong in a wild beast that was struggling frantically to free themselves from their bonds. The roar made Lich not dare to look directly while Sanchi. I felt extreme pain, witnessing how his brother, closest, gradually lost his humanity. Jimin revealed its nature, cooled by coldly uttering a ruthless sentence, ordering to end the life of his former partner Yang. Dada looked the way that Jimin sharp by the steps with coldness and determination of this student. Innocent Jimin turned sharp eye, looking defiantly at the strong objection of Yang Chi. Jimin stated that Chan Chong was already dead and was a threat that should be eliminated immediately. But Sanchi continued to shout with indignation, refusing to abandon his brother Hyan. Xiaoyang poured a bucket of cold water over the snow. Sanchi's hope, by confirming that once transformed, there was no salvation possible. Hiam Shajan unsheathed coldly a sharp dagger from his belt with a movement decisive and full of murderous intentions, pushed the gun into Jimin's hand, along with a brief order that made him sweat deeply to the child-faced student by terror. Ignoring the Chenchong monster screaming behind Yan, Chaoyong pronounced a cool death sentence. Ends with it. Jimin held the knife with trembling hands, sweating deeply when faced with the task of killing his former partner. With his own hands, Hian Chaoyong approached his ear and whispered seductive words, inciting the young man to fulfill his dream of possessing a weapon with the blood of others. Slap in the face. One hand firm unexpectedly the handle of Jimin's knife, stopping this outlandish action at the last moment. Zhang Si pounced, and the gun firmly, his eyes fixed on Han Zhouyan to assume responsibility, instead of that coward. The man with hair silver snatched the dagger, grated his teeth and declared firmly before everyone, "Let me do it." Sanchi held the knife sharp against his chest. His thorax was agitated by the extreme tension, but his eyes showed the determination to end his friend's life, to release him young, to went and mourn for the lesson. About the price of taking away a life, making it the toughest test of humanity for Sanchi left aside all fear. His eyes turned to assert their loyalty. Absolute to young Xiaojun while Jimin standing behind, sweated deeply. Qian but it smiled with the significant grimace. Upon hearing the test subject's desperate screams, tied tightly to his back without hesitation, Sanchi took the knife, sharp, and approached the twisted body. Frantically in bed of the hospital to execute the purge order. With bulging veins on the forehead, Sanchi raised the knife high, preparing to deliver the final blow. In the midst of the cry, desperate chenchung that tore the air, the blade of death cut the air and launched directly out of the lip, screaming from the victim with unstoppable speed. As sudden as a young ghost. Donon pounced and with his own hands, firmly Sanchi's wrist, stopping the blade just before it touched the Sanchi skin. Turned around in amazement to look at their leader with a look full of questions. For this inexplicable last-minute action, Hiam Shoyan coldly ordered that all the excuse that this waste was a case of special, and it was still useful. A bright red system notification panel appeared before his eyes, confirming the discovery of a variant, rare and extremely valuable mutant. The infirmary door slammed shut, hiding the dark plans to be developed. Inside, between the boss and the new vice president Chen Chong, screamed and twisted frantically in hospital bed, but Hyang only knew watched with a cold and penetration. Veins were bulging on Chen Chong's face. Grunted like a wild beast when he heard his leader call him by his name. During its young transformation, Xiaoyan approached him with a penetrating gaze and trusted him with an important mission. Instead of ending it immediately, the blue sky was eerily silent, in total contrast to the bloody chaos unfolding underground screeching. The luxurious car braked on burning tires, sliding down the snow-filled road, while the driver tried to control the bank panic steering wheel. The car lost control and crashed into the maple. A dense black smoke rose, pouring a bad omen for the occupant. Li Shushan crawled out of the twisted remains, scratched his head and cursed his bad luck. That did not abandon it. The euphoric thought he had arrived safely at his destination. Without realizing the hand of death that stretched from its blind spot, a chilling roar echoed just behind the back of his head, making Li Shushan turn sharply. With a pale face like wax, it's over. A zombie pounced and gave him a deep bite on the arm. Li Shushan screamed desperately. As the virus began to invade his body, Li Shushan fell backwards onto the asphalt, with eyes deorbited by the horror of seeing the zombie pounce like a princess to reclaim her life. No turning back, ran at full speed away from the car, smashed as death cold on the back of his head. At that critical moment of life and death, his hand found a life lever inside the car. Li Shushan let out a cursed cry full of frustration and wielded the lever directly against the boy's head to fight for his life path. The blow with all its force shattered the zombie's head. In blood and brains on the asphalt next to the billion-dollar car, gasped like an ox looking at the lifeless body. At his feet, and at the same time frightened and bitter, cursed his persistent bad luck. Before he could recover, Red Shushan sweat profusely by realizing that others, zombies, were slowly approaching. This place was not safe to stay for long. Gritted his teeth and ran to the workshop complex, fortified in front of it, hoping to find a way out in that place of death. Li Shushan ran upside down, directly to the large door of the base, leaving behind the heroes who were crawling behind him. The door slammed open, Gan Xiaoyan playing with a dominant presence, leading a squadron of zombie-eaters, heavily armed, ready for battle. Koijin walked, complaining with cowardice that the protective equipment was too much, cumbersome, and uncomfortable, demonstrating that there is no need to lament before it happens. Young Shoyuan immediately corrected his attitude, warning that zombies, although brainless, were strong as oxen, and that the novices without armor would only be able to disconnect soon. The whole team moved with caution around the corner of the workshop, and encountered a zombie wandering lonely in front of it. Hyung Xiaoyong gave the attack signal. Because they were already in the enemy's sights. They were all tense as monsters, but still strengthened their determination to fight to the death. The chest, when it hears the noise, abruptly turned his putrid head. Their white eyes shone with an insatiable thirst and frenetic pounce like a fly, but Hyung Xiaoyong dodged with the lightness of a feather, while still chattering, reminding their colleagues that to keep their distance and cover their backs. With only a light and technical leg sweep, Yang Xiaoyan made the zombie lose balance and fell face down to the concrete floor in a pathetic way. Taking advantage of the fact that the enemy was vulnerable on the ground, shouted, pointing to the vital points, the temple or the nape of the neck, so that their partners made the final blow immediately. Lauda gathered all his courage, let out a cry, to calm down, and wielded his weapon with all his might. Plaf. The gut directly hit the Colombian's head, putting an end to its miserable existence and marking the first victory of the nerd lot. Just finished hitting, moaned because his arm was numb, and Yang Xiao reprimanded him on the spot about hardness. Zombie Skull Petri on Tuesday to 1. Completely dead. Caught up suddenly and pounced to bite, but the Otu, trying to raise his arm wrapped in magazines to block the attack, spectacularly shaped teeth, putrefied squeak against paper reinforcement, making the Otu scared to death. Screaming for help, desperately like a pig whose throat is slit by Hyang, Badenswam with that to the defense of the textbook, and immediately ordered Chang Shi, who took the opportunity to act. Receiving the order far on its leader, Chang Shi swings the baseball bat from behind, pointing directly to the neck of the corpse that was busy biting its prey. Plaff, a powerful and accurate blow hit, causing the zombie's neck to almost break, saving his partner by the skin of his teeth. When the prey fell flat on its face, everyone rushed forward with enthusiasm to attack him as a group, while Bet and Xiaoyun ran, saying that they should not stop until it was completely destroyed. Once the Sanchi needle was cleaned, it was turned with a smile of approval and expression, acting its leader if the coordination had been standard. Tiam Shaya was about to a few words of praise when another shadow, thirsty for blood, rushed unexpectedly. From its point of view, blind with frightening speed, Senshi opened his eyes in horror, let out a cry, message to warn its leader of mortal danger. Just behind the back of his neck, the zombie opened his mouth, hurried, and let out a frightening cry. I have a sneak attack from behind, but unfortunately, had chosen the wrong target to get into. Bun charged his hands fast as lightning closed directly on the chest's head, stopping the bite with tremendous force that prevented him from moving. While squeezing the zombie's head, turned to hit Sanchi. An unforgettable lesson about never letting your guard down with your surroundings. Sanchi and Lao-Tzu were completely paralyzed. Sweat was squirting down their faces, witnessing the divine miracles and the terrifying calmness of its leader. In a nearby corner, the long-haired bully was hiding stealthily behind a concrete wall, with restless eyes, exploring the external situation. Was extremely confused at the sight of the Greeks, wandering everywhere, and move safe. Yan Xiaoyong, his thorn in his eye, had already perished. The familiar roar of the engine resounded. The armored weaponeer appeared imposing, like a mobile fortress among the debris of desolate Jiang. But only walked among the pile of recently eliminated zombie corpses. His dominant aura made the one who stalked will be terrifying. Upon realizing that the god of fight is still alive, the long-haired one hid behind the rear of the truck, with the face pale as wax when he realized that Hyam's group Xiao, not only was he alive, but was also hunting zombies, as if it were a ride. A shadow with bright eyes was hiding under the car, holding your breath, as I watched the feet of death approach. Feeling that death was lurking right above his head, a female zombie crawled on the floor with her face deformed and mouth full of black blood, eagerly searching for his hand. Putrefied suddenly Zhang Shenzi's ankle, leaving him with no time to react. Zhang Shenzi lost his balance and fell backwards, with an expression of horror extreme when he realized that death was calling him. Desperately shouted that. Cold sweat soaked him like a shower, as death hovered imminently before his eyes. The boy pounced on him without hesitation, his fitted mouth open to the maximum, preparing for a deadly Sangshan bite. burst into despair as the creature's teeth, stained with black blood, were about to nail themselves to his chest. A loud roar echoed with black blooding all over the face of San Shen's, who screamed in terror. Yawn. Doyum will stay in upright with the rifle, smoking in hand, had just been shot in the head. Lift guard. Sang Shan gasped heavily by pushing hastily the decapitated body of the zombie above of him. In an extreme panic, Shan literally squinted his eyes, by recognizing an old and playing coldly. Shan Shang say, "What the hell are you doing here?" Sang Shen rose with difficulty, with a bruised face, but his eyes shone with a ray of hope in recognizing that his old him Xiaoyong was still alive. He did not show the slightest emotion. His eyes ran down the person in front of him and stopped at a deadly detail. A bloody, fresh scratch was visible on the sleeve, torn, a sign of death, which indicated that the virus had begun to invade the bully's body. Without the slightest hesitation, Yang Xiaoyong coldly aimed at the cannon of his ear in front of his old friend, and pronounced the death sentence. "You have been bitten." Shan Shan raised his hands in terror, while Yang Xiaoyong maintained an absolute safety distance, indicating to him with his chin to say his last words. The tall man burst into tears bitterly, admitting that he was infected, and that he was left with only half day of life before becoming a hero. Bloodthirsty, he shouted with extreme indignation, accusing Yang's bastard of having kidnapped his wife and son as hostages to force him to steal Hyang's resources. "I don't know." Tuoyan activated his mental eye. His eyes shone a blue, intense, while he examined every expression on the man's face, desperate to discern the truth. Sanshin clung to the barrel of the weapon, desperately begging for using his former merit as a collector of goods to bet on the life of his wife and son Yan. But he revolted. Even though this man acted out of personal interest, it was not possible to deny that it had helped him to accumulate an enormous amount of young resources. Don't point to his eyes. His sly brain began to analyze the maximum benefit of the bloody tragedy unfolding before him. Poing squeezed the baseball bat with his face tense, while Shenbo, that was behind, also remained at maximum alert for personal changes at the fortress. A ding sound resounded like celestial music. Yang Xiaoyong smiled with enough, seeing that a lucrative business opportunity showed up at his door. The system display showed the mission to entrust the wife and son with 25 easy reward points. Immediately, his instinct to take refuge in the apocalypse, having captured the opponent's psychology, Yang Xiaoyong promised to take good care of his wife and son, hitting the fatal weak point of the dying man, saying. Shenzi got excited to the extreme, hit his head against the ground hard with a strong titch, swearing that in the next life would be an ox or a horse to pay its great benefactor. Immediately after, the oxygen sample lifted his head and begged Yan Xiaoyong to finish it off immediately, to put an end to their suffering before it was too late. The burly man wept like a child begging to die, not to become a hero, soulless that could endanger his own family. Pian Xiaojun ignored the plea. He turned around abruptly and ordered Klein to take a motorcycle out of the parking lot for their own plans. Fired Sanshin with a gesture coldly indicating that he was driving very far away to a desolate and remote place, instead of granting him a bullet of grace. Sanshin's dried tears and blood, thanking his benefactor Han with a stifled voice, showed him for the last time before accepting leave to protect everyone. Concentrated his last strength on his legs, pedaling the ramshackle bicycle at full speed like the wind to move away from the fortress as quickly as possible. The virus began to invade his brain, making one of his eyes redden, but in its delirium only muttered the names of his wife and son, with swollen veins on his face. Sanshin cried out in extreme pain, trying to use your latest of humanity to survive the discovery that emerged from Chen. Daoon moves him and leave before the pile of corpses that rose like a mountain, with all the equipment behind, looking at it with a mixture of reverence and fear. A jet of golden gasoline was poured abundantly on the pile of putrefied corpses, preparing for a cremation that would completely clean disease foes. With a click, the flame of the lighter Sippo was lit by incinerating the oxygen battery by placing an exhausting but absolutely effective cleaning day. Xiaoyong checked the notifications panel of reward points while analyzing boldly that their current henchmen were only strong enough to confront zombies, lonely without injury. He threw a jar of cold water at everyone by affirming that, if they encountered a horde number of undead, they would remain just mobile meat toys. Without losing one more second, Yan threw the gun into his pocket and ordered "Follow me," forcing the entire group to be revived and follow the leader. Zheng Xiaojun moves imposingly in front of the big gate. His lonely but firm figure made his teammates behind could only follow him in silence, waiting for the final order. Turned to call Chen, though with a cold but confident look. As the old man hurried to respond, to receive instructions, leader Shen Xiaojun's important. Threw the key to the arsenal as an order worth 1,000 kilos, stating that he would go follow into town tonight to take care of everything, entrusting the security of the fortress to the old man. Shenmo took the key with trembling hands, asking worriedly if the boss was really planning to throw oneself into that nest of crazed monsters. Senshi and Lao Tzu immediately jumped in, demanding to go with him, with a spirit burning to want to fight, side by side with the boss to the death, instead of staying still as Shen spectators. Choyan poured a shot of cold water on his henchmen, by criticizing them bluntly for being too weak, just a hindrance, and finally entrusted the base to Shen Bo to keep an eye on her before she left in a sitting position at the wheel of the car speeding away. Zhao Yong radiated a deadly coldness, with plenty of heavy weaponry, including firearms and crossbows, that were already standing still in the co-pilot's seat, waiting for the order to open fire. Opened the system store interface to review, but he only found 3 empty lines full of disappointment, cursing in a low voice that this system updated its inventory so slowly, like a turtle, without hesitation in the face of the difficult mission ahead. His finger pressed firmly the manual update button, agreeing to spend accumulated points to obtain a small survival advantage. A tin sound echoed, indicating that 2 points had disappeared. But in return, the store showed 3 boxes of luxury supplies, from dark technology to weapons, deterrents that make his eyes sparkle. High and Choyong frowned and sweated when he realized that the price, exorbitant for manual upgrade, had increased from 2 to 4 points, forcing you to consider each movement. However, the appeal of these luxurious supply boxes was undeniable. Took a look at his balance that was fair enough, and decided to bid everything without hesitation. The system issued at 10. The box of level 1 dark technology supplies had been successfully exchanged, consuming its 20 valuable points accumulated in an instant. The car stopped on the roadside with headlights sweeping the snow, creating a silence necessary for the inspection of the newly acquired. The box of objects opened, revealing a dominant reward. A vial of physical enhancement serum that added directly 5 strength points. The dream object for every player. A dazzling light from the high-level object exploded with force, forcing Yang Shoyan to cover his eyes, feeling as if he had thrown a stun grenade in the face. Held the syringe in his hand, with open mouth and wide open eyes, unable to believe his incredible fate by getting an object that increased its stats so much. With the decisive nature of a veteran, he immediately stuck the needle in his arm to inject directly this crazy force in your body. At that very moment, Deng Xiaoyong coughed loudly. His eyes went white and shone a white pale while the explosion of energy began to run through every fiber of his tense muscles. The status panel showed the round number of 13, confirming that its strength, the 6, was now 2.6 times that of a normal person, officially turning it into a living tank. The perspective changed to a high-rise apartment building, where Sanjin dice, a concrete fortress that stood imposing under the blue sky. Inside the apartment there was a world, peaceful with shelves full of toys and stuffed animals, in complete contrast to the chaos outside. Tightly, trying to assure him that his father would fix everything. The door opened abruptly. Yan Thao entered the house followed by a henchman, corpulent with the arrogance of Shaoli predators. With a pale face, babbled, asking what they were planning. Make those strangers at home. Yang Tao smiled disgustingly. The woman's hand, defenseless, and declared bluntly that they had come looking for a little pleasure. Brother, he ripped his clothes off towards Oli, without contemplation, despite their cries and pleas, desperate in the deepest despair. Two burly men pinned her to the ground, while Shui cried helplessly, seeing how his mother was humiliated, right in front of his eyes. A powerful step resonated strongly on the ground, interrupting the scene of violence that took place in the living room. Of being Yan appeared with a frown, adjusting his neck of the shirt and grumbling, because that group was bothering him. The henchman brother quickly ran to him to intervene, fearing that Yan Tao overstepped and ruined an important issue. Brother Li sweated profusely, trying to use his head cold to analyze the situation and make his boss understand that they should not act hastily. At that moment warned with abruptness that if they forced the wife to the point of the grandfather, the husband would have nothing to lose and would risk fighting to death against all of them. Yan Tao snapped his tongue, discouraged but complacent, and ordered the husband to be taken care of first, and then returned to torment the wife to her liking. Before Yan Tao left, he even turned around, stuck out his tongue and stretched out his eyes to mock with an attitude so shameless and that they felt like hitting him. The little boy, Lily, Shui in the dark room, mother and son. They could only tremble and cry after narrowly escaping. Night fell, and the growl of a zombie echoed in the cold, deserted street. The danger. Tian Xiaoyan drove with extreme fluidity, enjoying his 13 physical strength points. Their arrows and body control were fired. The car cut off the wind, zigzagging like in an action movie, skillfully dodging obstacles in the streets, desolate under the cold moonlight. The whole city had become the playground of death, with hordes of zombies and abandoned cars scattered everywhere. Car braked dry in the middle of Yanshujin Road, opened the door and came down with the attitude, a hunter's decision. Realized that the center was right in front of him. If he kept driving loudly, it would be like playing a bell to invite the zombies to a feast, so he decided to walk his senses and improved enabled Hyang to run. Bloodthirsty echoing right next to his ear. A zombie shot in the throat with its mouth open wide, putrefact, trying to bite the neck of his damn prey. With its superior agility, Yan Xiao also dodged the attack with the lightness of a feather, making that the creature's paw would be lost in the void. Without losing rhythm, immediately launched a lightning counterattack with muscular strength, overwhelming Hyang's elbow. Zhao Yang impacted directly on the zombie's face, leaving it with stunned. No time to understand what had just happened. The terrifying force of the blow through the body, rotten far away, accompanied by the crunching, satisfactory bones breaking. Once the heating is complete, raised his hand to activate his space ring. By invoking a heavy weapon from your virtual inventory, a long sharp sheet crystallized from pixels appeared in the hand of Yan Shoyan, who will stand upright as death, ready to slaughter the remaining heroes. Qin Shaojin threw himself like a wind-torn arrow, with bright eyes, leaving behind blurred speed trails. With a single, clean sword-cut head of the zombie separated from his neck and flew through the air as his body fell to the ground. Stood upright, full of pride, immensely accelerated when he felt his muscular strength, twice that of a normal person, completely dominated the creatures. Your mental eye to skin the young environment. Yahello released the tongue with discomfort when he realizes that his signal, supernatural, was being blocked by an obstacle. Looked into the bustling urban area and quickly located the source of sound about 800 meters away. A blue notification panel suddenly appeared in front of him. The system informed him that he had just activated a Rendezvous mission, random in a nearby store. A horde of zombies was tearing apart frantically the windows while a group of survivors inside was rushing to pile up things to lock the door. The mustachioed father, while holding the door, tried to reassure his frightened son, telling him that those bastards outside couldn't get in. The boy in the sweatshirt could not withstand the terrifying pressure and burst into tears, inconsolably, which increased the group's confusion. The mustachioed father turned to scold the old son for his bad luck. Despite the fact that the guard with the gun in his hand was still arguing with him, the old son sweated his eyes deeply, desperately wondered if that would be the final day for the whole group. Out of the glass mirror, zombies were frantically destroying, creating creaky impact sounds. The shrill sound of glass Breaking startled the old song and the cashier girl, who turned pale as death. An extremely strong impact, like the blow of a sledgehammer, made the whole room shake violently. Raising a cloud of dust, the father, mustache, and the guy in the sweatshirt were demolished by the commotion. The boy screamed in terror and panic. A shadow pounced with terrifying speed, accompanied by a delicious, the arrival of death. Fresh blooded the glass and end. Bloody event that occurred in an instant before the eyes of the survivors. The mustachioed father shouted, ordering the old song and the cashier girl to move quickly. Heavy objects to reinforce the shaky defense. The old song, with gun in hand, shouted to everyone to shut up, while father and son gritted their teeth, pushing the big table to block the door. Outside the store, the horde of zombies that used to be aggressive now, already scattered on the ground, eliminated by someone without making a noise. The old son and the group of survivors stayed, petrified in front of the, wondering who would have the ability to clean up those zombies as quickly and efficiently. The gamer student, pale and trembling, said that this was undoubtedly the work of an extremely powerful mutant variant. Hurried to explain to the old song that the variants mutants were like super resistant and fast-moving bosses, common in games and web novels. The old song, as he pointed his gun on Bart, took the opportunity to make fun of the boy, saying that it was not surprising that his notes were always at the end of the class for his addiction to video games. Ignoring the complaints, the old song sweated deeply and screamed to the group to concentrate as much as possible, without giving this boy any chance. Imaginary of attacking by surprise, the entire team moved towards the base, carefully observing in all directions. In the middle of the mortal landscape full of cars, destroyed and zombies, the old song raised his hand suddenly, indicating that they would stop. His yellow eyes detected a figure blocking the crossing. Yahello later dies. Standing under the moonlight with an imposing aura, the system panel had just displayed notification that it had completed the rescue mission and earned 5 points. The gamer student, seeing that silhouette, went into extreme panic, shouting that it was the variant mutant who had feared so much. The old song squinted his eyes, attentively observing his instinct. I told him that the figure that was there, he was more of a real that an Ahian Hyun, teeth in the face of overflowing gamer student imagination, stating that the variants mutants could not appear in mass. At that time, the old song sighed with relief when he confirmed that the person in front of him was a real. His eyes shone with a joy as if they had found gold. The old song lowered the barrel of his gun, finally the young man not to be alone, and enthusiastically invited him to join the group to increase their chances of survival in such chaotic times. Jian Xiaoqiang calmly embodies the identity of the other, while the old song was quick to present them as a search team for supplies from the nearby residential area of Rongxi, and confirmed that the mansion Jinyu was just across the street, demonstrating a knowledge of the field that surprised the group of the old song a bit. The old song hit his chest with pride, flaunting the firepower of Captain Lee and his vast experience in zombie elimination, promising absolute protection for the newly known. Kim Xiaojun sketched a social trajectory, full of motives, politely thanking each other for the goodwill of the other, but keep distance and your own calculations in mind. The whole group moved along the road, deserted under the moonlight. Kang Xiaoyong temporarily accompanied the patrol team. For more information on the situation in the area, a man from the patrol team squinted his eyes with suspicion, insistently asking him why he was interested in the mansion he knew, and if he was going to meet someone important. The curious continued to delve into his personal life at the sight of him to feel, speculating whether he was risking his life there to look for a family member, or to rescue his girlfriend. The old song put a hand on Yang Shoyan's chest, throwing him a jar of cold water by telling him that the world had ended, and that the person I was looking for was probably already dead. The guard gnashed his teeth on his face, marked by indignation in mentioning to those who were even scarier than zombies. Enjoy them or tonight, bro. Their cold eyes revealed sadness when they heard the other mention the phrase, that riffraffy old song. It exposed the crimes of the thugs who occupied the village, the that scum, willing to kill her killers to survive. Pushed his hand away, leaving the subject behind, and turned to remember the student gamer behind. That should always be on the alert, maximum when suddenly encountering strangers. The student gamer opened the eyes of, evenly matched and shouted in a shrill voice, warning the old song to be careful about what came from behind. A zombie shot out of the snow like a fly. Old Song reacted extremely fast, raising his weapon to block the attack. Just as Bang was approaching, the shot resonated strongly. The bullet embedded directly in the suspect's head, dropping him dead on the floor. Olsen stands firm in the face of enemy confrontation, releasing a bitter curse, knowing that the explosion had just been a death sentence. The sound of the gunshot had stirred up the horde of zombies. All turned their heads with hungry eyes. Locating the position of its Olsen prey was tense as a violin string, sweating my eyes out, while trying to keep his cool in order to look for a escape route between the fence. His eyes lit up as if he had found gold, seeing the blue bus, parked silently on the side of the road. The opportunity to survive was there. Without hesitation for a moment, Olsen shouted, ordering everyone to run to all, rush to the bus to dig in Hyun. To home with running while hit analysis mode. Gave 70 points to this play, because the boss was a good defense. But if the situation got out of control, would be like getting into a trap with no way out by the see a gamer lagging behind with death, stepping on his heels yawn. Objin yelled at the boy, if I didn't want to be zombie grass. The whole group rushed to the safe zone. A silhouette quickly by the door of the vehicle by the skin of its teeth, with the timely help of Olsen Bang. Olsen slammed the door shut with all his might, shouting out loud to remind everyone to review each seat carefully, to avoid being attacked by surprise from within. Hail Gamer student reported while checked that zombies from outside. They did not give up and crowded together like ants. The sound of Div knocking on the door resonated. Olsen pressed teeth with bitterness, seeing the faces rotting people glued to the window of the bus, realizing that they were still a step late. The hands of the zombies pounded on the glass, creating a deadly sound, which converted the bus in a lonely fortress in the middle of a sea of hungry zombies. The horde of zombies crowded out of the bus. Their hungry screams made the atmosphere so tense as a rope about to break. Olsen chipped his teeth, using the few forces left to block the door. But helplessly he saw a reflection. My head was peeking out of the crack, showing his fangs, and he cried desperately. Just at the moment when death was lurking, one hand firm suddenly appeared to help block the door, startling the old guard. Dian Shaoan comes like a cat, using his overwhelming force to slam the door shut, throwing the zombie out in an instant. Olsen was sweating like crazy with his eyes wide open, unable to believe that this boy would possess such incredibly exaggerated strength. With a cold young look, Zhao ordered Olsen to mobilize everyone to break the glass and fight to the death against outsiders, while he would be in charge of blocking the old door. Songa felt in a hurry and ran away like a machine. I love Hyung Xiao Zhang standing upright, with one hand firmly holding the door and radiating a dominant aura crash. The sound of broken glass strongly resonated with a series of glass windows were destroyed from the inside. Fragments flew everywhere like rain. Zombies who were thirsty for blood stopped suddenly when they realized that the dam had inside the bus. They were no longer lambs waiting to die, but they were ready to go with everything. A devastating blow went through the window frame, smashing the face of the unfortunate zombie, officially marking the beginning of the bloody counterattack. Manager Shu unloaded all his fear on his spear, frantically stabbing the skull of the emerging zombie, accompanied by a fierce cry that demanded his life. Inside the bus there was Chaos Gamer student and his colleagues joined forces to repel the monster out the window with all his strength, while Old Sung pointed his gun to give support. Olsen sweated his ass off when he realized that the gun in his hand was nothing more than a reflection in the face of the overwhelming number of zombies, and the ammunition was about to run out. Right at the critical moment, Ing Xiao unexpectedly handed over to the old guard a high-quality military crossbow. With the order to use it immediately, Old Song held the heavy weapon in amazement, while Yan Xiaodong with total calm joked that he had picked her up casually. Makes a moment to hide its origin. Without losing another second, Yang Chao Zhang roared loudly. All its power to launch an attack that awaited the approaching horde of zombies. The whole group took to the streets, forming a young combat formation. As if it were a bomb, clearing the area around the bus in an instant. Seen from above, the survival team coordinated rhythmically, forming a circle of death, zombie corpses and maid, scattered at the feet of those who had just escaped of the gates of death. Gamer student, after escaping death, began to rave about the game, wielding his stick and screaming, excited that they were all destined favorites. That's why they had survived like Hyun leeches. Choyong immediately poured a jug of cold water about that excessive enthusiasm, reminding them boldly to all who to remain calm and not to make mistakes again. Stupid. The night covered the impregnable fortress. Someone was praying in silence that Young's journey showed him out when him suddenly volunteered for the night shift, urging the group to go to sleep early so that he could stand guard alone. A colleague with glasses, who is strange, spoke about this unusual enthusiasm, but Jimin glared at him with his eyes when he was discovered. Jimin raised his voice and shouted, noisily to disguise their nervousness, and ward off subtly to the nosy, left in a hurry, sweating profusely, leaving the other standing dazed without understanding why his partner had reacted in the same way, so exaggerated. Chang Boli trusted appearances and accepted that Jimin bathed the night guard so that everyone could rest. The old man even warned him carefully that you were very alert, not knowing he was handing the keys to the devil. In the cold watchtower, Jimin sat alone, observing the situation, waiting for the right moment. When everyone was asleep, he got up, revealing his treacherous face, determined to carry out his dark plan before the god of war, Tian Shao, will also return. While Chen Bo slept deeply, the key to the arsenal that lay on the table became an appetizing bait for the traitor. Elderly Shen Bi slept soundly in bed, completely unaware of the danger lurking in the room. Jimin stood still in the door with his face expressive. His sharp eyes scrutinized their prey and calculated each movement. With stealth, extended his hand towards the important key to the arsenal that lay exposed next to the snoring old man. Jimin's greedy hand the key decisively, while Chen Bo was still noticing anything. Unexpectedly, Chen Bo woke up suddenly, his eyes wide open. When his survival instinct alerted him to an intruder, the old man shouted, questioning the suspicious action, and Jimin clenched his teeth and cursed for being caught in the act. Without saying a word, Jimin's bastard threw a punch devastating in the old man's face to silence him and escape. Immediately spawned down the aisle at full speed, ignoring the cries of Chen Bo, who demanded the key behind his back. The loud noise startled Kuang, Sang-chi and Liao, who were stunned without understanding what the hell was happening. Shen Bo, with swollen face, screamed in panic, reporting that Jimin had stolen the key to the arsenal, and asked everyone to immediately arrest Jimin. Ran at full speed as if being chased by dogs, ignoring the cries and curses of old Shen Bu and Kuijin's group that were following him closely. This bastard came down, running down the stairs while kicking a garbage can, creating an obstacle for their pursuers in a way that Min Kun, drowned standing in the mirror, looked down, gritting teeth and releasing a bitter curse, not believing that this brat would dare to do something like that. At that moment, Jimin ran at full speed to the door of the infirmary, braked abruptly, and then looked inside with an expression full of calculations. A sinister smile appeared on his lips. The eyes of Jimin shone with a cruelty in deciding to play a game, all or nothing with the group. Pushed the door and entered. In front of him was Chen Chong, tied tightly to the hospital bed, grunting uselessly in his thirst for blood. The boy's muscular arm extended in vain, trying to scratch the air in search of a Chen Dane. Chong pounced suddenly with a terrible roar that startled Jimin, who quickly resetted and cursed for having been about to be caught. Sweated like crazy when he discovered that one of the safety straps had come loose, wondering if it was because of a knot loose or because the chest was too strong. Fear quickly disappeared, replaced by the expression triumphant of the villain when Jimin realized that he had saved himself the trouble of releasing to the hero with his own hand. While the bastard of Jimin was quietly walking away from the scene, the group of Sanchi and Kwaijin arrived in a hurry when he heard strange noises. Sanchi opened his eyes wide, sweating my eyes out by realizing of criticism situation that was developing right in front of him. Realized that the damn Jimin had released deliberately to Chen Chong of the infirmary to use the poison and kill everyone. Shenbo Maldived, curious for having underestimated the ability of that brat, while Kuai was extremely confused to see that all the weapons were locked in the castle. Without letting fear dominate Yuchen, Bo shouted out loud, ordering everyone to and apply. Immediately that young Xiaodong had taught them how to avoid infection. The group immediately took up its combat positions, firmly surrounding Chen Chong, who was stunned in the middle of the room with his skin pale and deadly. When noticing an opening in the chest, Sanche swooped down from behind at breakneck speed, shouting out loud to signal the attack. Launched an extremely strong strangulation, squeezing Chen Chong. The sound of the bones colliding was creepy. Lotto and Kine also did not hesitate to pounce and hold on to firmly the shoulder arms. The group united forces to completely control the grunting target. Frantically, Shenbo pointed and shouted out loud, urging everyone to carefully tie this guy and take him back to the infirmary immediately. The group gathered all its strength, amped back and simultaneously pushed Chen Chong to the isolation room to avoid the risk of infection. The door slammed shut with a deafening roar. Kenbo hurried to hold the doorknob to make sure that the hero could not escape. Old Shenbo sweated deeply, hitting the face to the door glass to observe the situation. Inside with extreme attention, Chenchong grunted frantically behind the glass. But both Sanchi and Senbo frowned with suspicion, because controlling it had been too easy than expected. Senbo gritted his teeth and cursed upon realizing it, that they had all fallen into a trap to buy time, giving the brat the opportunity to sneak away and steal all the arsenal. Just as Jimin finished talking, suddenly appeared from a corner with an expression, Mockingbird showing annoyance at being called a brat. He cursed with resentment because Yang Shoyan had been cunning in hiding all the weapons. It only had one gun in the arsenal for him to fight her, however. Only a gun in his hand, it was enough for Jimin to show his true face. Aimed at the dark cannon and forced everyone to move to the inner room. Sanchi couldn't believe what he saw. He shouted, questioning why he dared to betray his savior. The person considered the messiah of the group, Jimin came out with the logic of a villain, arguing that the grace of having been saved had become slavery, and that he preferred to reveal himself rather than live as a servant all his life. Shen Boss sweated profusely, her voice trembled, while I was trying to use how little loyalty he had left to reason with the brat. Traitor, while left behind him, was pale as a ghost. Jimin dismissed all pleas with a deafening cry, noted the dark cannon and forced everyone to shut up and obey. Absolutely, Shinchong inside the glass cage seemed to be in chaos. His white eyes were moving frantically, full of death and savagery. Ignoring the chaos behind him, Yan Hyoshin kicked the door and ran away, seizing the opportunity to escape this deadly trap. The silent night covered the tall, narrow buildings, where death lurked in every corner of the city. In a safer corner, the patrol team was pointing the way to Yan Shaoyan, warning us about the complex terrain and the reinforcements that were hidden in the villa area. Jin Yu, the patrolman, carefully instructed him that, after finding their relatives, out to the meeting point at the door, rear of building number 8, and would not dare to go through the main entrance. Yan Xiaotan smiled with confidence, raised his thumb to indicate he had understood, and then turned around to leave, with an attitude as if I were walking in a park. At the sight of his lonely figure vanishing in the dark, the two patrolmen looked at each other with concern, thinking that this young man was looking for his death. The patrolman sighed with regret, his head in discouragement. To think that someone with their good skills was about to lose his life, practically in the hero's lair. Night fell on the mortal city, with zombie wandering aimlessly in the cold moonlight. Due to total yawn blackout, Tao was leaning against the wall with an expression of resentment, guessing that San Chen was He had probably already died outside. The bald bully could not resist his bestiality. Shouted that he wanted to let off steam tonight. Because I had endured too long. Yang Tao smiled with approval, hatching a vile plan to tie Sang Shen's wife up. So that he could not commit suicide in the dark corner. Dali hugged little Shuai tightly. Mother and son trembled with horror, listening to the obscene and perverted words. Yang Tao lost his patience and ordered his men to act immediately, but warned them that they should keep long-live women so they can have fun. Brother Li, who was on guard, stopped and suddenly bowed his head to listen to a strange movement coming from the darkness. Looked down and sweated deeply and seen that all the zombies blocking the corridor had been cleaned by someone, with bodies scattered everywhere. A figure of a man dressed in a suit climbed up the slope with a cold attitude, every step echoing compression in silent space. The brother stared at the spark of hope shone in his mind. That it could be the team of, I thought the bully had just arrived. Opened his eyes in horror to feel the intense, murderous intention coming from behind the Sanjin door. Suddenly appeared on the threshold, with an expression full of murderous intent. His eyes seemed to want to devour his living enemies. Bang! The door was brutally kicked. Tremendous strength made the bully in the vicinity scared to death. Cheng Sheng will stand firm, protecting his wife and son, and coldly ordered the scum to get out immediately. The bald bully was not only not afraid, but laughed joyously, blatantly pounced to grab Xiaoli. Ignoring the warning, Xiaoli shouted, terrified when picked up by the rude man, struggling in vain to escape Zess. A slap in the face, fierce, landed right in the face of the defenseless woman, leaving her stunned and cutting off her cry for help. The bully threw the little boy, Shuai far away, as if it were an unknown object, stating bluntly that his target was only the mother. Shuai, despite having eyes full of tears, rose bravely. The child roared and threw himself into a fight to the death to save his mother, but the difference in strength was too great. The child was kicked out of the room and fell to the ground with a painful blow. Shua, despite snowfall, pride threatening those beasts, using his father as a shield with the tenuous hope of saving his mother. But life is not a dream. A black shadow flew through the door and landed on the floor with a roar, with Thyra Shenzi beaten almost to death. The child was paralyzed, with eyes wide open from horror, seeing that their only support, and it stood still like a pile of shredded meat. From the entrance staircase, a terrifying pressure emanated, accompanied by of eyes that shone with a greenish glow, scaring Shua to the bone. Kim Daodun appeared with an eye direction, looked at the child, and confirmed the identity of the man who had just been thrown. Without bothering to give explanations, Yang Shoyan passed over the child to enter directly into the scum's lair. Inside the room, Shaoli shrunk, making turns trying to cover his body. Uncontrollably by humiliation, the cruel bully gave him a brutal slap in the face, forcing her to moaning aloud to satisfy their perverse instincts. Another bully Shaoli's hair and pulled back, laughed disgustingly, and declared that he would be the first in enjoying the bang dam. The door to the room was shot down by tremendous force, startling Yan Tao, who smiled with disdain, praising the strength of the who dared to interrupt. Stared at the shattered door, realizing that the person from outside had kicked the door down. Was not an easy person to deal with. Turning to the bald bully Yang Tao, shoutedly, ordering him to quickly throw that brat somewhere else. But before I could do anything, bang! Yang Shoyan like a wind, throwing a punch right in the middle of the enemy formation, leaving everyone stunned. Yan Tao was pale as a ghost, sweating my eyes out, and exclaimed in extreme panic that he didn't understand what the hell was passing plot. A hand of steel crashed directly against the face of the false leader, stopping all stupid questions. With a magical impact, with a cold, intentional look that kills Yan Tao, Yan launched a devastating punch, throwing Yan Tao like a sandbag. Broken to everyone's astonishment, the treacherous friend ended up flying backwards, vomiting fresh blood, with white eyes from not being able to bear the power overwhelming and absolute of the protagonist, the bully who was about to commit his depravities now trembled uncontrollably, with a pale face, babbling when asking about the identity of the Kirstidi who had just appeared in front of Shaoli. A brutal kick landed directly on the victim's face. Jimin did not hesitate in using violence to assert his position as the one wielding the gun, pointed the dark cannon of his weapon to the group of old and weak, shouting at them to move immediately. If they didn't want to try, Lead Shenbo sweated like crazy, trying to put pressure on the leader to buy time. But in front of a firearm, all reason turned wild. Jimin's face was contorted by his delirium of power, babble on cruelty, and its desire to establish a power of attorney, absolute above all the group. He ran it wildly, pointed the gun directly at Shen's head, and stated that he would be the first to die as a warning. Shenzhen was completely horrified, shouting the name of Yiming in vain to prevent him from pulling the trigger. Just at the most critical moment, a strange noise from the infirmary caused the traitor to startle and turn sharply, temporarily forgetting its grip. The door handle of the infirmary, which was firmly closed, suddenly turned frantically, pointing out that someone inside was about to open the door and leave. The door opened suddenly. Shen Shaoyuan, Ali surrounded by dust snow, as a deity, and radiating an overwhelming aura that left the man armed, completely paralyzed, all looking speechless as the key automatically rotated in the lock. Unable to believe that a crazed monster like Chen Zhong knew how to open a door in such a civilized way, Jimin turned pale as death and sweat. I was running in droves at the sight of the imposing gray figure of Chen Chong appear right in front of him. Chen's face, Chong revealed himself clearly with his eyes injected in blood and prominent blue veins. Was undoubtedly a bloodthirsty demon. Jimin gritted his teeth and pointed his gun directly to his opponent's head, shouting its determination to eliminate immediately this intelligent threat. His finger pulled the trigger hard, but there was only one dry click. The bad fortune that had come for the traitor opened the eyes of, even when he saw the gun growing in his panicked hand. By realizing that its only weapon had become stuck at the time of life or death, Chen Chong roared wildly and pounced on the weak student, who trembled with fear, fresh-blooded everywhere, accompanied by Yiming's heartbreaking cries for help. Although it smashed it against the ground and smashed at Chen Chong walked erratically with his face covered in blood. Came up behind Shen Bo and the others, who were petrified by horror. Jin Chong boldly the shattered corpse of Jimin on the floor. I found a trace of dark blood that left Chen petrified Bo in the corner of the wall. The whole group, including Chen Bo, Wujing, and Yanqi, was sweating like crazy, without understanding what the hell was going on. While the reflection changed suddenly his attitude from frenetic to calm. Shen Chong breathed a long sigh on his face. Venice still retained a trace of the bloodthirsty frenzy from a moment ago. Sheng Fu people, I was staring at the boys' legs, covered with fresh blood, so scared that their hearts seemed to want to get out of their sockets.